Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the October 25th meeting of the City of Palos Verdes Estates City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kemps.
Here.
Councilmember McGowan.
Here.
Councilmember Murdoch.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Roos.
Here.
Mayor Losey.
Here. Thank you. Okay, let's look at tonight's agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda or comments? And if not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Councilmember Murdoch, seconded by Councilmember Kemps to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. Mayor's report. I don't have a ton. I will say that last Saturday, and all the council members had a chance to get out there, but last Saturday, the Llenada Bay Homeowners Association had a super successful harvest festival. I don't think I've ever seen so many jump houses, floaties, stuff everywhere. And we all, for some reason, I ended up the organizer of the pumpkin races, which was a ton of fun. And it was, anyway, very successful event. So not only congratulations to them, because we all know how much work things like that are to organize, but big thank you for bringing the community together, because there were just a ton of young families out there, and that was great. I wanted to just share a press release that we on the council received yesterday, and I would assume it was pushed out far and wide, but just in case people aren't aware, the PVP, the Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District, put out a press release yesterday saying that in the most recent current K through 12 district rankings, we were rated number 1 in the South Bay, number 4 in the number 4 school district in the Los Angeles region, which includes LA County and Orange County. We were also ranked number 10 just really, no, there's a number 10, sorry. 10 in the state, sorry. Number 10 in California, and nationwide, 76 out of 10,751 schools. So we should all be very proud of that. Dr. Cherna says, these rankings are a validation of the quality of our schools and the commitment to put kids first. So I thought that was big news for the community, and if you want more information, certainly go to the school district website, and I'm sure the full press release is there. So that is it for me. I will ask the city manager for his report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of updates. Cox Cable has an open house tomorrow night, October 26th from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is at Hess Park at McTaggart Hall in Rancho Palos Verdes in collaboration with the city of Rancho Palos Verdes. This week we will be publishing another of our famous now city updates. These are bi-weekly updates. You can learn how to follow those and subscribe on our website. The new edition will be issued this Thursday. And finally, I want to honor and welcome our new management analyst, Kia Boribone. Kia is here tonight, and I'm going to invite her to introduce herself to you briefly. She has a very strong background in communications, and she will be leading the city's work plan task of implementing a cost-effective, inclusive, and modern citywide communication strategy. Kia, welcome.
Welcome, Kia. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I've met some of you previously. My background is as a consultant, a management consultant, but I have some change management experience and lots of communications experience that I hope to bring to this very engaged community and keep them connected and engaged and informed. And so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. We are thrilled to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kia. So at this time, let me turn it over to our police chief, Chief Best.
Thank you, City Manager, Honorable Mayor, and members of the City Council and community. I too have someone to introduce tonight. So I'd like to introduce you to our newest service officer, Jenny Takatomo. And for those in the community who do not know, service officers serve as jailers and 911 dispatchers within the police department. And I must say they are the most important person you'll probably never meet face to face, but they're always ready to take your calls. They answer your calls when you're having the worst day of your life, or when your property or your life is in danger. They dispatch officers to your homes, to accident scenes, to crimes in progress, and they do it all with a calm, reassuring voice. Basically, what I'm trying to say is they're pretty important. Jenny has lived in the South Bay her entire life, specifically in the Harbor City and Carson areas. This is very interesting, fascinating. In 2011, Jenny interned with the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. So I'm sure she has some interesting stories to tell. In 2015, she received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Cal State Los Angeles. She also ran a small business from 2017 to 2021. On a personal side, she's a huge hockey fan and baseball fan. She's also an avid reader, and I don't know how she does it, but she reads on an average of 10 to 15 books a month. Wow. Yeah. She is excited for the opportunity and looks forward to learning and growing as an employee with the police department, and we are excited to have you here, Jenny. She starts her jail training tomorrow night? Thursday. And then she'll transition on to dispatch. So you may hear that friendly voice on the other side of the phone line, but if you have time, stop in the dispatch center, the lobby, and say hi to Jenny. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Welcome.
I have two other quick updates before I pass it over to Merlin for some community updates. At the last council meeting, the council asked for an update on the oversized vehicle ordinance that went into effect in January of this year. Things are going well. It's an effective tool to keep these large vehicles from creating some of the hazards that they could create in our community. To date, we have issued 13 parking permits, so residents are calling in and getting their vehicles registered, which is a really good thing. When we go on these calls, more often than not, we're able to educate and gain voluntary compliance, and the vehicles just move out of the area. In some cases, we do issue citations, and to date, we've issued 9 citations for the oversized vehicle ordinance. We will continue to monitor the program and make any necessary adjustments to ensure that the intent of the code is maintained. The last update I want to talk about briefly is about crime. And I will say, although PVE is a very safe city and we live in a very safe community here on the peninsula, we have experienced an uptick in burglaries as others in the region have. Recently, some of you may have seen it on social media. There was a video shared a couple days ago about a burglary that occurred in the Via del Monte Gatos Place area. And interesting about this video, it shows 2 suspects checking for unlocked doors or windows around the perimeter of a residence. They checked that residence and there were no unlocked access points, so they went on about their burglary activities and went to a neighboring residence and found, unfortunately, an unlocked door and entered that residence. This was about 3 in the morning, so it's a little scary because there are residents home. For whatever reason, they were scared off and left the premises. So it's just another reminder that you should have a nightly routine. Make sure all your windows and doors are locked. Report suspicious activity to the police department. Become an active member in your neighborhood watch group. You could find a whole host of crime prevention tips, including a home burglary checklist on our website, and then also on the Neighborhood Watch website and the events that they host throughout the year. That concludes my updates, and I'll kick it over to Merlin David, our Community Relations Officer, for some community updates.
Excellent. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and the community. We have been working on a bunch of new things, and I'm excited to share those with you. Prepared Peninsula is this Sunday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's a 3-hour event that we're doing with emergency preparedness. All 4 cities are working with us to do this, so we're excited to bring this to you to help you prepare. Are you prepared for an emergency? There's going to be also free food at this free event, so that's always a draw from what I hear. But it'll be at the Peninsula High School this Sunday, October 30, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So please come on out, find out how you could have a go bag in your car and be just prepared for any emergency and anything that might happen to you during those times. What I'm really excited about, not that I'm not excited about that, but what I'm really excited about is a week from today, we are going to be doing the Special Olympics Torch Run. It's a law enforcement torch run. The week from today at 10 a.m. It's going to start at Lunada Bay Elementary School, and it's going to wind its way down Paseo del Mar, and then it's going to come all the way to the Malaga Cove Fountain. And I'm working with the schools this year, so we're getting all the schools involved. Lunada Bay Elementary School is kicking it off. Palos Verdes High School is sending their band, their cheer, their song teams. So it's going to be just this amazing thing that they're going to have at the Epping Cliffs. And then when we come to the end, we're going to have the Peninsula High School come and do the same thing with their band and their cheer team and their song. So we're just excited to just do something that's unique, shine a spotlight on special education, which is so important. These kids deserve our time. So please come out and support us. Make some signs. A couple of the scout troops are making 150 signs, and they're going to have it all distributed over there. There's lots of people helping out. Malaga Bank is also involved. The PVP Library District is involved. So just come on out. Email me if you need to, mdavid@pvestates.org. I'll tell you how you can get involved. Also, you can buy T-shirts for $25 that goes directly to the Special Olympics, but you can come out and support it that way. So that's next Tuesday, 10 a.m. to 11:15, and it's going to be at November 1, starts at Lunada Bay, ends at the Malaga Cove. So come and join us, cheer on the law enforcement runners. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe next time you could be a little more enthusiastic.
I'm going to try.
Thank you. Were you finished, Chief?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Very good. And Mark, did you have anything else were you finished?
Nothing else, thank you.
Finished with your report? Okay, very good. Okay, communications from the public. I have a few cards up here, but if people would like to speak, you should see cards on the end of the pews. There's got to be another word for that. Rows with pencils, so please send those up. And so our first speaker from Neighborhood Watch is John Cradell.
Thank you. Good evening. Nice to see you all. I'm John Cradell. I'm from Neighborhood Watch, Lunada Bay section, and I just have a brief announcement and update from Neighborhood Watch. Our PVE and Neighborhood Watch annual meeting is coming up on Sunday, November 13. We will be holding it at the City Council chambers at 2 p.m. There will be interesting and timely speakers, local entertainment, raffle prizes, and a little bit of community fun. Oh yes, and we will be electing our officers for the upcoming year. Please plan on attending this event. We're excited. This will be our first in-person meeting for a few years. Make sure that your membership is up to date. 1 membership per household, and it's only $10. If you renew your membership now, it will cover you for 2022 and through 2023. Our membership year is the calendar year to make it easier for you to remember. By paying now for January 2023, you're getting 3 months for free and catching up in case you're a little behind. Our memberships and donations are used for community programs, events, education, minimal administrative costs, and our annual meals for police and fire workers who work on Thanksgiving and Christmas. The holiday meal has been a long tradition as a gift from Palos Palos Verdes Estates Neighborhood Watch. Your membership helps to send this support to our first responders who work on those holidays. Make sure you go to our website for lots of information on how to be safe and prepared against crime and for emergencies and disasters. Our website is pvenw.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Great, thank you. Desiree Myers.
Thank you. I fully support keeping the PVE, local police, and offer the financial solution to sustaining the police into our future on my website. We need leadership offering solutions, not smear campaigns to deflect responsibility. We have not balanced the budget in 4 years. Our budget needs to include all costs. Excluding costs is like saying we have no inflation by excluding food and energy. Eventually it catches up to you because you can't continue to run the city on debt. The city has stated we have cash deficits starting next year, even after spending through the $3 million windfall in COVID relief funds we received. I offer a diverse perspective and voice. I would have voted against the roundabout, for increased communication with residents, and sought to balance the budget long before we reached the point we are now. We've had 4 years to improve our financial state, transparency, and trust, but they've digressed. We need another perspective at the table. As a candidate, I offer specific solutions which I share on my site, desforpve.com. I seek election to improve decision-making and provide the residents a seat at the table. Similar to my candidacy, I will do so in a professional manner without cruel attacks on my colleagues' characters. Our city's best path forward is to move beyond the mean and divisive rhetoric to finally solving our problems and serving with honor. I will take the high road even during the campaign. I seek to use effective communication and engagement with the community to build a much-needed bridge of trust between the residents and the city. We need to talk about the PVE Foundation study to develop acres of open space around City Hall and do so honestly and openly. This is our land and our money. Disclosure and transparency should never be a scary prospect for a governing body. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Fine.
Thank you. I'm Christine Fine, 389 PV Drive West. Thank you. And this, there's so much good in this community and about this community that it is unfortunate I feel I need to comment on the City Council election. The 5 of you City Council members were elected to be leaders of our community. I feel the 5 of you are truly interested and care about our community. But if you had shown the leadership we need, and if you had stood up and criticized the POA, which is the Police Officer Association, regarding their unprecedented smear campaign against a resident of Palos Verdes Estates, Des Myers, that would have been the leadership we needed. Each of you now really totally owns the smear campaign as your own because no one has stood up against it. I recently read the following. It applies to this campaign. Hiding behind an abusive, unprecedented process and misrepresentation of the facts shows this for what it truly is, a corrupt and broken election campaign in desperate need of reform. The email letter received a few days ago from Palos Verdes Friends that continued this smear campaign notes on the bottom of their letter their mailing address, which is 340 Palos Verdes Drive West. Remember that address. 340 Palos Verdes Drive West is where we are right now, in City Hall chambers. Producing such a degrading campaign is bad enough. Using city resources to add to this is disgusting and must be stopped. It is no surprise that Des Myers is the only candidate for PVE City Council who's endorsed by the Election Forum. They have given her the highest endorsement possible. I have worked alongside Des Myers in various capacities and have found her to be a relentless researcher who backs up her facts with hard data visible to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Cooper Cass.
Hi, my name is Cooper Cass. I'm a law clerk at Angel Law. I'm not an attorney. I'm here to read the following statement from attorney Frank Angel, who could not be here tonight, on behalf of PVE resident Russell Smith. It is well known now that Councilmember McGowan, while serving on this council, also serves as the president of the Palos Verdes Estates Foundation, a new 501c3 hoping to, quote, further the visions and values of the city and its constituents through public-private partnerships. The foundation's website also states, quote, the PVE Foundation was created as a means of raising tax-deductible funds to be utilized for the benefit of the community. According to the foundation's 2020 Form 990, Councilmember McGowan spends 20 hours per week on foundation work. Now let's talk about behested payments. For those who are unaware, behested payments are those made at an elected official's behest, principally for legislative, governmental, or charitable purposes. The following is from the California Fair Political Practices Commission website, quote, a payment is considered behested and subject to reporting if it is made, 1, at the request, suggestion, or solicitation of, or made in cooperation, consultation, coordination, or concert with the public official, and 2, for a legislative, governmental, or charitable purpose. State law requires that behested payments be reported if they total $5,000 or more per calendar year from a single source. Officials must report the behested payments within 30 days of the date they are made, unquote. Behested payments are reported on Form 803. Angel Law recently asked the city clerk, in a Public Records Act request, for all behested payment reports filed with the city by Councilmember McGowan. The city clerk answered that the city has no responsive records. Interesting. So Councilmember McGowan, the president of a foundation whose main goal is to raise funds, has not solicited, requested, or even suggested donations? For someone who spends 20 hours per week on foundation work, a foundation created to raise funds, that sure seems implausible, considering the foundation has raised over $1 million. And it can't be the $5,000 threshold. The foundation has accepted and disclosed very large donations, including a $10,000 donation from Mr. and Mrs. Deepak Chopra. Is Councilmember McGowan unaware of his obligations under California law? Perhaps, but in response to our Public Records Act request, the city clerk sent us a Form 803 filed by Councilmember Kemps in January. Councilmember Kemps reported a $10,000 behested payment made by his company, Innovative Computing Systems, to the PVE Foundation. So it's hard to believe that the president of the PVE Foundation would be unaware of his obligations when his colleague surely is, especially considering his foundation was the beneficiary of Kemp's behested payment. Given Councilmember McGowan is the founder and president of the foundation, and given the foundation has initiated and is pursuing an effort to convert City Hall property into a revenue-producing venture by financing the ACOM study, which is study building a small hotel, restaurants, shops, professional offices, and housing on City Hall property and the surrounding open space, the public has a legitimate interest to know about his behested payment reports. We ask that Councilmember McGowan come clean and stop flouting state law transparency requirements. As Blake Gilman said at the last council meeting, appearances matter. There's the appearance of a conflict of interest. That's what makes it wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm down to my last couple cards here. Anyone else wanting to speak? Send up a card. Okay, Blake Gilman.
Good timing. Okay, that's going to be pretty hard to follow. So today, I'm just going to focus on a couple of points, mainly from the PV Beach Club interview with the candidates that occurred, I believe, last week. And one of the questions posed to Councilmember McGowan was, what do you envision for Malaga Cove Plaza? I have heard of possible hotels, more restaurants. Also, please explain AECOM's role. And Councilmember McGowan says, there's a lot of false allegations. There's nothing that has ever been said about any kind of low-income housing, commercial development, or any other potential strategy. It's strictly an economic analysis study to help provide viable options so that the city and council can evaluate those options to take it to the residents. Well, I'm a little confused, sir, because when I reviewed the contract between the foundation and AECOM, I noticed that, in quote, some of the uses to be investigated were a small hotel, dining in small shops, professional offices, and attached housing, sale, rent, and senior. And when it says just and senior, that makes you think perhaps it's subsidized senior housing, and perhaps other housing in that location would also be subsidized. Another point I'd like to make is in his closing at the Beach Club meeting, Councilmember McGowan said, communication is number one, but we have to have something to communicate. I find that highly ironic because, as you know, sir, on October 11th, 2 weeks ago, I requested from you the IRS Form 1023. Didn't get it. October 13th, a couple days later, I emailed the foundation's attorney, Richard Greenberg, who I understand his wife is also the treasurer of Palos Verdes Estates. October 17th, followed up with Richard. I hadn't heard anything. Finally, on October 17th, Richard confirmed his receipt of my request, but nothing happened. Another 4 days go by. October 21st, I email Mr. Greenberg, and I also express my angst. I say the fact that I haven't received the docs by now is troubling, but still nothing. So finally, today, 2 weeks after the initial request, I follow up again with Mr. Greenberg, but this time I have to actually
Just 10 seconds, sorry.
mention the law. So I mention IRS Pub 557, which requires the documents be released within 2 weeks. That is today, and as of now, I do not have the documents.
Thanks, Mr. Gilman.
Pathetic.
Okay, so I'm down to my last couple. Any other cards? Okay, Raymond Hooker.
Good evening, Mayor Lozzi, council members, city staff. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to thank the council for their continued service to our community, and a special shout out to David McGowan for his work with the PVE Foundation. Appreciate your hard work, David, and the goals that you have achieved thus far. Look forward to many more years of you contributing positively to our city. I have cast my votes for all three of the incumbents, and I hope that you continue to do the good work and build upon your successes over the last 2 years. Secondly, I'd like to say that I do not want to see our police department decimated by staff cuts, the resulting cuts in service, and I trust you can put together a reasonable plan to keep our outstanding police department. I support a new property tax measure that does just that. Desiree has called our police department corrupt. Fact. Fact.
Stop, please. Not you, her.
Understand. I support the POA and their effort to protect themselves and their jobs. I find it incredulous that our city attorney allows a political candidate to get up here and speak and attack members of our council without our council members being able to do in kind. I think it is a I think that she's been allowed to corral and use this forum for her own political gain. Again, I'd like to see the three other candidates come up here and speak to address the issues that Desiree Myers has brought up to the City Council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Janice Mayer?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Janice Meyer. I got involved with the City Civic Affairs to help our city during the last 4 years, and I feel our problems have gotten worse. More debt, less resident engagement, and communications, and I'm very worried about the budget. I worked with an outstanding group of people on the PVE Land Preservation Act and was struck by how wonderful the group was and Desiree's leadership. She introduced us all and brought us all together. The entire group stayed together to support Desiree's candidacy because we know her intellect, commitment, and ability to work well with people. She was the one that identified the two aspects legally that help protect our land and place this into the Preservation Act. In my opinion, There is no one in this room that works harder than Des, and you only need to look at the Beach Club forum to understand what I mean about her intellect and ability to deal with adversity. She is grace under fire. She has my vote, and only vote I will cast, and I speak for many of us. Mr. Hooker should not lie in this public forum. She never attacked anybody. I would like her to finally fix our problems that have gotten worse over the last 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm down to my last card. Any other speakers? Last call. Okay, Joan Davidson.
Wow, talk about smear campaigns. You should understand that Russell Smith, who hired Frank Angel's attorney, is Desiree Meyer's biggest major donor, giving her $10,000. Very important fact. Let's be transparent about Des Myers. Des sent out an email to the community yesterday, quote, "Beyond the deflection of a smear campaign, judge for yourself." Des, you started the smear campaigns in PVE long ago. Let us not forget you attended every council meeting in September and October of 2020, gave 3-minute public comment speeches slamming my family and me. Speeches on Zoom that are recorded as part of a public record amounting to character defamation. And you called my child a liar on Nextdoor, and he was pathetic, you said. It gets worse. You stated in an email a year ago to our city manager and expressed that Barney Fife could have done a better job. You accused them of falsifying police reports. You accused the police of corruption and ineptitude. You said their characterization of me stands as the official record, and this is wrong. You've accused the police of hanging out. And recently you stated, we can't save the police when the sheriffs provide greater services for half the price. So what's changed that you now support the PVE PD? Or is it that you don't support the PVE PD? Which is it, Des? You brag about the seat on the Pension Ad Hoc Committee, but I was there and you did nothing. You state support of the police, but which police? Rumors are spreading that your meeting with Tony Best, our chief, went so well. But that's not what Chief Best said to you in his email on October 3rd. Reading directly from Chief Best's October 3rd email, he said, you referenced 2 missing rapes and suggested that the PVE PD did not disclose or report them. I was shocked and believed that this was an attempt to spread disinformation. Any suggestion that we hid crimes is false. During a private conversation, you asked if I felt that you supported the police, and I explained that I never felt you supported the police. You need to better understand the impacts of your statements and the manner in which you pose your questions. In 2020, Des, you tried to pose as a PVE employee by using her same first name. When caught, you asked Nicole Fretch of OpenGov to keep this our little secret. This is documented. You're running on transparency, and you out and out lied to a public agency to gain access into a closed city meeting. Wow. Your campaign statement says you want to revitalize Malaga Cove Plaza. Does this have something to do with the $10,000 you accepted from the real estate developer? We can only deduce your motive is what your buddy Tom Bossler told me when putting up your signs. The PVE PD are too expensive, we need the sheriffs. That's simply not true, and you know it. You are the inventor of the PVE smear campaigns and misinformation. You have made this entire campaign about the police. Why is that? The council has already implemented the McCrary Police Sheriff's cuts that was in the report, and kudos to you guys, all 5 of you. Thank you. You want the truth? Watch the video footage, read her written statements, go to therealdes.com. And you want endorsements, because I don't see any that Des has, goes to the incumbents' campaign websites. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we clapping now?
Darcel Hansen.
Hello, good evening. Hello, Chief Best. There are several points I'd like to make, but the first thing is I'm so grateful to follow Ms. Davidson
so that I can clearly state that Russell Smith is not a developer. He is my friend for 30 years. I rented for 25 Via Corda for about 15 in my professional life. He's a concerned resident whose parents were pillars in this community even before some of you, as you try. And he stepped up to do the right thing. And I hope we will do other projects together with the city. The next point I'd like to make is with Ms. Murdoch. I wonder if you got your minutes about the new ordinance of the oversized signs. Did you get any feedback about that? Because we should not have had a smear campaign on a big truck parked illegally. There wouldn't be one truck, Chief Best, that would be allowed to be there, parked like that. And I found it wrong. And it looked like it was an obvious allowance that should not have happened, even by the police union. They do not have permission to park like that and to bring in something like that that's against our rules. It was wrong. We can all have different views of details of things, but the things Ms. Davidson said are wrong. They are not correct. I thank you, Blake, for talking about AECom. That's dirty, and we know it, and it's only a matter of time. I'm very disappointed that we did not have, an open forum that wasn't somehow tied to a beach club or a different city areas, limits, little coves. We should have had a town hall meeting where we could get responses. It's just a shame how each of you stand behind the 3 minutes, never giving a response. And it's wrong. We deserve to hear responses. Excuse me. I don't know who's talking. Please don't. I have 17 seconds. It is a really unpalatable, poor, and looks terrible for your characters. The Cuckoo campaign.
Mayor, that's time.
Thank you.
Oh, time up. Thank you. You heard it.
Okay, no more public speakers. I'm going to close the public comment. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Obviously, all sides of issues. People certainly have a right to come up to this podium and say whatever they'd like. They say what they believe to be true. They have a right to stand up there and read from the phone book if they'd like to. Absolutely their right to do that. And I just want to point out that it's important for people here, people watching, to make sure that you do your own research, stay up on issues and candidates, study up, and make an informed decision. And I think we'll all, 2 weeks from now, be happy with the outcome. Thank you. All right, consent agenda. We have items 1 through 7. I probably have one change myself, but let's see, City Council action minutes, warrants, the catalytic converter, second reading of that ordinance, financial statements, Planning Commission actions from October 18th, amendment to the Traverse Tree Service agreement, and changes, or budget assessment, sorry. I believe our city manager would like to pull number 2 so that you could make some comments. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we're going to pull 2. Anybody else have anything else they want to change to the consent agenda? No? No. Okay. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 7 minus 2?
So I'll move it.
Wait, do we need public comment on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have any speakers?
I don't have any speakers.
Oh, okay.
So
I forgot. It's not like Zoom where they raise their hand.
They can raise their hand. No,
They're welcome to raise
but no. Okay. Okay. Sorry. One of these days, I'm going to get that one right. Okay, so not hearing anyone wanting to speak, I think I heard a motion from Councilmember McGowan, and second from Councilmember Murdoch. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, so let's take item number 2, approval of warrant registers, and I think our city manager had a comment on that.
Yes, I wanted to make the council aware of 2 items on here that were mistakenly overpaid. So we had, in the last payroll run, the city's 2 police captains updating compensation. It was not programmed correctly, so they were mistakenly overpaid on that last paycheck. They made the finance staff aware of the issue, and both have reimbursed the city. Pay records have been corrected, and the city has implemented some manual adjustments to correct the issue until programming modifications, the correct ones, are made. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on that? No? Okay. May I have a motion to approve item number 2, approval of warrant registers?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Murdoch and seconded by Councilmember McGowan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you. Thanks for those clarifying comments. Okay, so let's move on to our public hearing. Do we have? We do. Okay. All right. 1 second. Let me pull that up. Got a second to come up. Oh, and my staff report won't download. Of course not. Ah, there we go. Okay. Cheryl, do you need me to wait for a second for that to come up?
No.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay. All right. So item number 8, we're holding a public hearing to hear NC 174521 and M 154822, neighborhood compatibility and miscellaneous applications for a remodel and addition to an existing single-family residence at 760 Via Del Monte, Lot 12, Block 1537, Track 6884. And may we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor and members of the City Council, this application before you is a neighborhood compatibility and a miscellaneous application for a remodel and addition to an existing 3,896.96 square foot with a 2-car garage, single-family residence on 12.199 square foot lot at 760 Via Del Monte. The first public hearing was held on July 19th. The concerns raised focused on neighboring views, mass, and the project design. Based on these concerns, the project was continued to the Planning Commission meeting of September 28th. At the second public hearing, which was held on September 28th, the Planning Commission was divided regarding compatibility with the surrounding homes in the neighborhood and addressing the concerns discussed at the previous meeting, while the other half felt the redesign did not alleviate the massing or view impacts to the surrounding homes. Both Planning Commission packets are included as an attachment, and following a 2-2 decision per City Municipal Code, the project is before you tonight. Characteristics of the proposed project include approximately 152.75 first floor addition and a 1,089.74 square foot new second floor, a 311 square foot second floor open deck, 54 square feet of additional hardscape. 27.5 is the maximum building height, and that is measured from the maximum ridge height of 339.5 and the natural grade of 312. The building and lot coverage are within the maximum allowed. The building coverage is 28%, the lot coverage is 63%. Basically, the proposed single-family residence will increase to 4,582.49 square feet with a 556.96 two-car garage, which totals 5,139.45 square feet. The project has received preliminary approval from the Palos Verdes Homes Association. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt the resolution before you approving the neighborhood compatibility and miscellaneous application subject to a list of conditions. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Before we take the presentations, anyone have any clarifying questions for staff at this point? Anyone? David, Michael? Okay. Okay, so we will take 5 minutes for the applicant. Yes. Oh, does anybody have anything to disclose? Beat you to it. Does anybody have anything to disclose that was not part of the public record?
I visited 760 Via Del Monte, the house across the street, which is probably I don't know if it's Via Del Monte or
801.
801?
Conejo.
Okay, and then also 804 Via Conejo.
I visited 804 and spoke with the owner and her 2 adult children, and I visited 812 and spoke to the owner.
Before we go on, did you guys learn anything that was not otherwise in the record?
Sure. I saw the view from his deck. Does that count?
Sure. If there's anything relevant, just to describe.
Yeah. So during both site visits, I was shown what the neighbors saw as the impacts to their view.
Also visited all those properties, but probably didn't learn anything that isn't already public?
Also visited all those properties, saw the view from the 804 deck, also verified because it's close that I am not within the allowable, I am outside of the allowable circle, and it is not within my my matrix.
Thank you.
And I did visit the 760, and I walked the neighborhood. I wanted to get into, I think it was 716, but I was not able to get access. I did not talk to the other neighbors, but I did walk the area as well as drove the area.
Great, thank you. Okay. Okay, so we will start with a 5-minute presentation by the applicant. We'll take public comment and then closing 5 minutes from the applicant as well. So why don't you go ahead and start with your first 5 minutes, and that's your presentation, right?
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, council members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all, and thank you for visiting our project. My name is Clark Corey. I'm the homeowner. I'm also here with Brian Winters, our architect. We'll be fairly brief in this presentation since we did speak on site, but as a matter of public record, I want to go through this quickly. If you could advance to the next slide. So my wife and I recently moved to the area. We bought the home last year. We've been in the South Bay for 6 years. We fell in love with this neighborhood. We have a 1-year-old son, 2 dogs, and we're really excited about building a long-term home for ourselves in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Our objectives of this were to restore some of our views that over time have been eliminated with tree growth and new construction. We wanted to add an additional bedroom for family visiting. Both parents live out of state. We want to limit, of course, the impact to our neighbors. We feel like we've done a good job of limiting the impact here. And that's really the key factors that we were taking into account when designing this home. Next slide, please. In terms of existing support, we have support from 756, who's our neighbor to the northeast, 801, 805, and 809 Via Conejo. They either showed up to the neighborhood meeting or expressed both verbal and written support. Next slide, please. In terms of our process, Cheryl did a great job outlining it, so I won't go through this. We've been to 3 planning commissions. The first, the original date, we were not heard, unfortunately, after waiting for a long time. after the July 19th meeting, we made changes. We reached out to both 804 and 812 via Conejo to run by changes. We did not receive responses at that time. They did not want to engage with us, unfortunately. And then we presented again on September 28th, and the result was a 2-2 tie. So that's where we are today. In terms of, next slide, please. In terms of the comments, there were several concerns that we heard and addressed, but the key concerns were around view impact and massing. We feel like we've done some to address that. And it's important to mention that we did not meaningfully impact. There was little to no impact to any Queens Necklace views or city views or mountain views for either of 804 or 812 via Conejo. We reduced the height of the home by 1.5 feet. And I would note that during the last Planning Commission meeting, there were 2 commissioners that basically said that there was insubstantial view impacts, or that this project was really not a view issue in their estimation. Next slide. The other thing that we did to help with massing was reduce the retaining wall that the original retaining wall that we had in our initial proposal. It was initially 5 foot 2 inches. We reduced it to 2 feet 8 inches plus the railing. So we feel like that'll make a big difference in terms of the massing towards the street. I included some additional slides. I won't go through those, but we walk the neighborhood every day. We see lots of homes that are much taller, have 3 stories, are built above natural grade, tower over other homes, and so we feel like this is far less egregious than those, and therefore we feel like it's appropriate. So that's my public comments. Happy to take any questions for either myself or the architect.
Okay, we will let you know if we have any.
Okay.
Did you want, Mr. Winters, did you want to take the last minute or not yet? No, you're good? Okay, very good.
I'm happy to answer.
Perfect, thank you. So let me open the public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? See someone walking this way. And you are?
Hi, I live at 812 Via Conejo, so I'm the neighbor that he's referring to. Unfortunately,
so tell us your name.
Oh, sorry, Brett Johnson.
Thank you.
812 Via Conejo.
Great.
I think this is an interesting dynamic because the neighbors that he's referring to that are in support really aren't affected from a view perspective. There's really just the 2 of us, the 804 and 812, that are affected. I feel real bad because I'm looking forward to building a relationship with my new neighbor here, and they seem like great people. It's solely an issue of they're building effectively an entire story on top of the home in a terrace neighborhood. And so he's correct that it doesn't affect my necklace views, but it affects my sunset views on a home where specifically on the deck that you entertain from, right outside my kitchen and family room. I appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem, coming by and seeing that in person. The Planning Commission folks that did come by and see it immediately saw that as well. I just feel like it's almost a little bit of a war of attrition. I've also attended, sat on the Zoom the whole time, unfortunately, just like you did, right? For the first meeting, submitted my written comments. The first Planning Commission was unanimously not in favor of this for the reasons that were already in the record. Then the second one, we got to a 2-2. I'm not sure why, because really nothing changed. And now here we are. It's the same issue. And it's not, I love the fact that they want to invest in the neighborhood. I love the fact that they want to build a new home. Just, it's a terraced neighborhood, terrace going up like that. And yes, there are 3-story homes in the neighborhood, but not when they affect people's homes like this would affect mine and my neighbors. So, it's not just this house. It would be a precedent for the other homes in the terrace neighborhood. They could also then add another story. And I'm not sure that saying that, one part of my view is still okay, that doesn't mean that the other view isn't also important to me, is probably the right way to say it. So you're either impacted or you're not. And I feel very impacted, and I felt like I had to be here for my 4th meeting to make that comment. So thank you, and I really appreciate all of you guys, putting the time in that you do. I really respect that a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak?
Hi, my name is Janelle Carvajal. I'm the daughter. I'm the daughter of Rigo and Aurelio Carvajal, my parents. But I also think my point of view is pretty valid because I live there full time. My grandmother does as well. It's a 3-generation house, and so I'm here on behalf of my parents. I apologize in advance, by the way, they couldn't be here today, but yeah, I will speak for them. And so first off, some of our concerns are, although we appreciate the attempt at alterations in the plans and the compromises that they're attempting, to be honest, we didn't notice them at all, because I think the reality is that it's not a matter of lowering the roof or anything. It's this level is what's impacting our view of the mountains, the sunset, even the palm trees themselves, which are like, this is what PV is known for, you know? And I understand why anybody would want to build and regain these like views, as he was saying, to like, because and build a patio and a room facing these views, because I've been enjoying it from my patio and my bedroom window for 6 years now. And I think the difference is my parents bought this house with these views already intact, you know? The patio I stand and watch the sunset from all the time, it's the same patio that we originally bought the house from. And I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's a pretty, you know, old house still, you know? And so it doesn't really feel like a compromise going forward. It feels that should this remodel go ahead, we would just be forced to surrender these views, it's significant. It's a significant portion. I saw the photos, and to be honest, my view from my bedroom window is a lot. I know some of you have come and seen it. It's beautiful. I wish you could be there at sunset because you could see everything. But also our other big concern is that, like what Brett was saying, that the precedent that would be made, because yeah, say this goes through, yes, we lose the sunset, the mountain range, and that area. And yeah, I've heard some people say, well, you still have the city view and you still have the coast view. But if this precedent is made, these other 2 houses, I think one of them that are directly in front of us, one of them I think is also 1 story. In the future, what's to stop them from trying to do these remodels, and then it's going to be the coastline, and then it's going to be the city views. And so basically, we're not trying to be difficult with these proposals. I truly believe that any of you who bought this house with this many, like, these beautiful views that PV is absolutely known for. That's why, like, my family moved here. That's why, like, my grandmother living with us. But you would do the same thing as us.
Thank you so much. Your time's up, but thank you so much for coming to share your point of view. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Did the applicant want to present again at the end?
Hello, Council. My name is Brian Winters. I'm the architect of the project. I'd just like to respond to the 2 neighbors. And as much as we want to be neighborly, we've tried to reach out to them both over the course of this entire project. It really strikes us both as quite odd that they don't return emails, they don't return letters, they don't return any communication whatsoever, but they show up here. We're trying to work with them. We tried to do everything. We've lowered the house. We've lowered the slope of the roof. We've decreased the size. We've, what else have we done? We've moved the pool equipment. We've taken out landscaping. We've tried to accommodate every one of their requests. As a fact, the second floor addition will only be 7.25 feet taller than the existing ridge of the existing house. So it's not like this massive looming thing. It's not that big. It really isn't. It's a hip now and we're going to a gable. And you take away the numbers, you do the math, it's about 7.25 feet taller than what's there now. So it's really not that impactful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Curry, did you want to take the extra time, or are you good? Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I'll close the public hearing.
Can I raise a question with either the architect or the owner?
Have to reopen the public hearing?
You can ask a question.
Yeah, okay.
You can
go
ask
ahead.
a question.
Yeah, I'd like you to expand upon a little bit of the neighborhood compatibility and the outreach to the neighbors, and you were describing that there was lack of response or something of that nature. Can you help expand upon the time frame and how many, and what this was all, how it all transpired?
Well, ever since our driveway meeting that was required by planning the neighborhood compatibility study, we went around in our 300 diameter circle, passed out all the packets. We invited everybody to show up, gave them times, a full packet of what you're looking at now. Many people showed up. Is it Aurelia's?
The Carbajal's.
The Carbajal's did show up. They started throwing out lawyers quickly. So I stopped talking to them, in a sense. And Mr. Johnson was not there. And over the course of this entire process, which has been months, we've had no communication from them whatsoever, and we've tried to reach out again and again and again, but they show up here and have their 3 minutes.
Yeah, I would just add that at the neighborhood meeting, the Carbajal's expressed a couple of concerns. They did mention the view impact. They also addressed vegetation and pool equipment. We committed to them at that time, and then also during the Planning Commission meeting and in a public forum, that we would not introduce any new vegetation on the elevated side yard that would impact our view. We would buy quiet equipment, and we would do additional soundproofing to eliminate any or mitigate any potential noise that the equipment did make, even though the equipment is not in the setback and we're not required to do so. And then after we presented to the Planning Commission the first time, we did reduce the height of our project. We're willing to do an additional reduction to the chimney as well.
Yeah, I looked at that today, as a matter of fact, and we can bring the chimney itself down 2 feet without having any impact.
Which would take it below the ridge of the entryway tower that's there. So that's really how, as Brian said, we sent emails to both parties on several occasions, did not get a response.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, that's a pretty extensive response, and it addresses other parties. You may want to let them respond.
Other members of in the public comment part?
The other two that commented, if they want to add anything to respond to that.
Well, yep, because we've reopened the public hearing now, so, yep. Mr. Johnson, did you want to comment? You don't have
Yes,
to run.
I've been in a renovation in that house for 2 years. COVID just makes everything just take forever, it feels like. And so I actually haven't been living there, still have my home in Lenata Bay. I've been an active member of PVE for 11 years. Both my kids went to PV High, member of the community for a long time, but have not lived in that house yet. So luckily I got the packet, I agree. And in fact, I did get an email from him. I responded that I was traveling, and to be fair, I did not actively get a dialogue going. I don't live there, so I didn't make the roundtable. And when they did send me an email with, hey, we'd like to reduce it by 6 inches, and can we talk about a compromise? To be honest, I'm seeing a house that's 7 or 8 feet taller than its existing ridgeline. I just felt like it was going to be incredibly contentious, and I didn't really want to argue with my neighbor. So, I just felt like this was better. But anyway,
Nope, thank you.
most of those comments are accurate.
Okay. I have probably one more question for the architect, but do you guys have anything else?
I have a couple questions for the architect.
Go ahead.
You want me to go ahead?
Sure.
So, Mr. Winters, if you could come back, please. So, I spent a good deal of time today. Thank you for the large drawings. Because these tired eyes
That's what I
don't
was
see those
told to
electronic
provide.
ones.
I'm sorry if they're too big.
So thank you. Thank you for those. So they were helpful. But there were a couple of things on the drawings that confused me, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I was understanding the drawings and that we had whatever the final version is, because I know there have been a few iterations. So, for example, in one of the pages, it shows the laundry rooms upstairs, and the other page, it shows that it's downstairs. So are there 2 laundry rooms, or what's going on with the laundry rooms?
The laundry room, there's only one laundry room. And
Okay.
it's a multi-level, so it's on the bedroom level.
Okay, okay. And then the other thing I was trying to read, where you had the yard setbacks
Yes.
indicated, and in a few of the drawings, it looked like some of the buildings were extending beyond the line into the setback. I don't know if staff or the planning commission or anyone checked that. I just want to make sure whatever we're looking at is meeting whatever the rules and codes are.
As far as I know, and I've done them, there's existing setbacks that we're not moving, the walls, so we're using a lot of the existing walls as part of the remodel, and any new walls that are being built are further back than the setback requires. We're under the development standards, so we're further away than what the setback actually allows. So
Okay,
it's
and, okay.
it's
And then
not
is the footprint the same, or where does the footprint differ from the existing building?
You'll see the area, the majority of it is on the second floor, the addition up, which is the kitchen level, and the great room level. That's the majority of the addition.
Okay, so the actual footprint is,
The actual footprint's majority is pretty close, yes.
thank you.
Yep.
You mentioned were you finished? Yeah. You mentioned moving the, I'll call it maybe the main chimney down 2 feet, but isn't there another chimney on the
Yes,
east side of the house?
there is, yes.
Yeah, that seemed kind of big too. Can that come down?
I lowered it already 2 feet in the computer as well.
Both of them 2
Yep.
feet? Michael or Jim?
I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to.
Well, let's ask questions and then maybe.
I have
I'll-
one question, I
Okay,
think.
and then I'll close the public hearing and then we'll bring it back. Go ahead.
Can you address, are there reasons other than cost that the existing, I'll call it front structure of multiple sets of stairs leading up to the side of the house have to be retained, and that the net addition of the second level cannot be lowered to accommodate in particular the view at 804?
It's mostly cost and the footings, the existing footings and the existing walls of the existing home is what we're trying to utilize. So by lowering any of that portion, the project would become uncostly.
I would just also add that it would eliminate the purpose of the second story.
Which is?
If we were to lower it.
As in, because you're
As in
trying to
it-
capture the view on top?
Yeah, we would not, it would be in essentially the same place as we are today if we lowered the house by, 7 or 8 feet, as suggested by some of the planning commissioners and Mr. Johnson.
Don't walk too far away. You can go. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing then. Nope, I'm not closing the public hearing. Did you have something else you were going to say?
Oh, I just thought you said don't walk too.
No, I just meant like, don't walk in the back. I'm sure you'll be back. Okay, so let's close the public hearing and bring this back. Who'd like to start us off?
I will start. So I watched the meeting, and I think Commissioner Lazaro made a point that, and I think that this is, I've observed this myself, I think this is kind of a unique section of Via Del Monte, these 3 houses, and I'm referring to 752, 756, and 760 in particular, because although most of the area between Via Samonte and Via Del Monte is heavily terraced. This area, the change in grade is much more gradual, and it has the unique feature of 804 being an unusually placed lot that spans the 3 backyards. I mean, I think the applicant proposes what will undoubtedly be a major improvement for this neighborhood. It's a beautiful house. But the first floor elevation of the two-story part is, the finished floor elevation is 316.24. The natural grade there is 310. There's a lot of room for it to come down. And it would take quite a bit to restore the view in 804, which is substantially impaired. 812 also has view impairment to a lesser extent, but 804 loses quite a bit. I am inclined, though, because, in watching it, we had our new commissioner there who was 2 days on the job, and I'm inclined to remand it to them with those notes and let them pick this up from there.
Okay, let's ponder.
Well,
That on the table?
Could I get some, when you say remand it to them with those
Kick it back.
notes, what does that mean?
Kick it back with comments and direction.
Kick it back, and the staff report will reflect our comments here today.
Councilmember Kemps, did you want to go next?
I think that the design and the look of the home is gorgeous. I struggle with, which is why I asked the question, I struggle with the overall height, the way that it works into compatibility in the neighborhood. And while I understand the desire both to retain the existing foundation and footings and to retain a minimum of one wall, I'm no architect, but I've done these projects, and I think you can definitely maintain a wall. So the implied property tax issues are probably not an issue. I struggled with this because in some ways I could go either way because it's on the corner. And were it not for the view impacts on 804, I think it could potentially work. I think the chimney drops are definitely required. I like the idea of remanding it because, at the planning commission level, I would say this is a continuance. I think, while I understand the desire to gain the view on the second floor, the whole idea behind neighborhood compatibility is not to gain that view at the sacrifice of the others. And so with the intent of being both good neighbors and having the joy of having a new home, I think that needs to continue, and the communication and the dialogue needs to continue. I also struggle, and it was either Commissioner Nendick or Lazaro that also made comments relative to setting precedents by setting the height of this home and then continuing with additional second-story improvements, continuing on down the street that would potentially be a reason to allow that to continue and further destroy views. So I don't think that we've achieved compatibility. I do celebrate the look of the home, and I hope that this can be achieved in a way that can be made more compatible.
So I have similar comments because I think it is a beautiful home. My concern is the scale and how it fits on the lot and for the area. And actually, for me, it being on the corner makes it even more out there in my face. So if it were a couple of houses down, I might have a different perspective. And, like we've done in many of our discussions, since we seem to be doing a lot of planning commission discussions on this council, compatibility, neighborhood compatibility is about working together, and I've got issues with just taking away someone else's view to give a new homeowner or the new remodel view. And I'm also concerned about this domino effect, because if this house has it, then the house next door is going to do it, and the house next door. And then what's going to happen is, whether it's the current or the future owners of 804, they're going to be like, well, you've taken away all my view. Now I'm going to build a second story. And then 752, 756, and 760 will say, wait a minute, privacy issues, because now your picture window to see the view is looking into our backyards. And it just keeps going. And so I think part of the finding for neighborhood compatibility is that the architect has done everything reasonable to minimize impact. And as I look through the plans, and, and I love the spaciousness with the two-story entry and all of that, I just feel like everything hasn't been done in order to try and accommodate the view impacts for the neighbors.
Councilmember McGowan?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the remanding this back to the Planning Commission, which I wasn't originally thinking about. After having reviewed the Planning Commission tapes, and I found Commissioner Wade, I thought, was right on target as he and his colleagues were reviewing this situation. But the fact that we had one commissioner in absentia, if you will, even though he was present physically, I think that maybe sending this back to the Planning Commission with some of our thoughts, but I would also encourage that if that happens, that we would ask that the owner and the neighbors re-engage some more in neighborhood compatibility conversations. I think Mr. Johnson indicated that he wasn't participating in some of those early on, and maybe that would have helped bridge some of the gaps that need to be dealt with here to try to make this a win-win for both all property owners. So I'm leaning towards the sending it back to the Planning Commission.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to add my comments. I actually have to say, I thought I'd be sort of hanging out here all by myself on the kicking it back to Planning Commission. I'm like, oh, okay, everyone was thinking the same thing. Okay, but I am going to add some comments because, this will all be part of the public record, which then will all go back to Planning Commission, because what we don't want is to send you back to Planning Commission and have nothing change, and then you land back here again. I mean, that's not the goal here. So, I appreciate that you guys all, I think, a lot honed in on the view issues, and obviously our two speakers were presenting their case from a view perspective. But I do want to add, so for me, and I think there was one of the pages in the, someone grabbed a quote from somewhere about, oh, this isn't a view, this is not a view issue. And you grabbed half the quote, but the other half of the quote is, this is a mass issue. It really is. And it, I visited and you tromp around, and I slept on it last night, and then I drove up and down and back and forth and around, and because it's awfully big. It's beautiful, no question. And I think this comment actually did come up in one of the Planning Commission meetings, is that the right lot for that house? That corner is tough because you're kind of up ahead of everybody else. I do agree. I think the 801, 805, 809 are not even impacted. So to have their support is like, okay, great, they look the other way. So I think, and I think that when you look, let's say if you're standing on the other side of Via Del Monte and you look at how the houses kind of, they kind of go down, and then this one is just going to go kaboom. And then if you look on the other side, which is 801 Via Conejo, 801 is super low. It was remodeled, and clearly the people behind them said, you got to keep it low. So now you're going to have, so it's not even like on that corner, you're going to have, too big. That one's low. So this one is just going to, it's just too big. And grading down is a tool that we often use, and I hear what you're saying when you're like, well, if I grade down, I'm back where I started at a one-story house. I understand that. But I think we also, you have to be sensitive that you don't get to buy a one-story house and without a view and say, oh, if I put a second story on it, then I'll have a view. You got to land in the middle there. So, I think I'm hearing a consensus that we send this back to Planning Commission. We have just to clarify for people who might be listening, we were short one Planning Commissioner who was appointed, but literally a couple days before their hearing. So he will be up to speed. He probably was maybe anticipating this because I think he's already been working on it. But so I do think going back to Planning Commission with 5 people, I think is going to help. I'm sorry, I know you're probably thinking, okay, what's going to change? But please take these comments to heart and think. Please, neighbors, try to work together because that's what neighborhood compatibility is. But I think are we ready to take a motion to remand this back to Planning Commission?
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if maybe this is for staff. I was going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Ruse because he was on the Planning Commission. When a city council remands it back to the Planning Commission, is that direction to the architect to bring forward an alternate set of plans that better mirror the comments and the feedback, a la a Planning Commission meeting? Or does this same exact discussion, I'm trying to avoid frustration and people having to review this again, right? I think what I'm hearing is our direction is to provide that feedback and suggestion to the architect, so that the discussion at the Planning Commission is the next step in neighborhood compatibility after discussing it with neighbors, as opposed to, well, you heard what they said, go do it, right?
And that it addresses the massing and the view issues.
Right.
I can jump in here. So this is being remanded back to the Planning Commission for them to consider the project de novo. They should review this hearing so that they can see the full record. They'll need to see that before them. I believe the other planning commissioner is up to date, is now familiar with the whole record. There is no requirement for the applicant to make changes. It may be in their interest after hearing some of the discussion here to make those changes, but they have the right to have the project as they present. They control the project to have a decision made on that. So there hasn't been a decision made. They do have the right to do that, but I think they'd be well advised to consider what's been discussed here and what was discussed at the Planning Commission before.
I'll speak for myself alone. I think what I'm trying to avoid is a situation where it goes back to them. They make a minor change. It gets appealed to us, and we go months and deny the project. I'm not saying we would do that. I'm saying I'm trying to ensure that neighborhood compatibility actually happens here, so that what's eventually brought forward, hopefully we never have to hear it and Planning Commission can approve it.
I think that the point's been made, but we can't require them to change the project.
I understand.
If we're just remanding it back to the Planning Commission.
Yep, I think we've made that.
Yep.
I think we have. Okay. Anyone else? Close it up? Okay, can I have a motion to remand item number 8 back to the Planning Commission?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Mayor Pro Tem Ruse and seconded by Councilmember Kemps. Do I have to do a voice vote on a public hearing, or can I still do a roll call, or can I? Yeah, why don't you do a roll call?
Councilmember Kemps.
Aye.
Councilmember McGowan.
Aye.
Councilmember Murdoch.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ruse.
Aye.
Mayor Lozey.
Aye. Okay, I'm done with that. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming and for speaking. All right, on to new business. Okay, item number 9, review and adoption of one-time revenue and general fund surplus policy for the City of Palos Verdes Estates. And I am going to ask our city manager, Mark Prestwich, to start with some comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to take an opportunity to introduce this item briefly before turning it over to the chair of our Finance Advisory Committee. This is the second policy in your work plan that we're bringing forward. So it comes on the heels of your adoption of the pension funding policy. And tonight we're bringing you, and this is specific to the item in the work plan, a one-time revenues and general fund surplus policy for the city to consider. So this began earlier this year with the formation of an ad hoc committee with the council, as well as a subsequent formation of an ad hoc committee of the Finance Advisory Committee. And through a series of meetings that our chair will describe, this policy has evolved. So it's also guided by a lot of research that the council ad hoc did. And I want to also credit Councilmember Murdoch for a lot of extensive research on that. And so tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of our Finance Advisory Committee, John Nendek, who will walk us through the policy. And our staff is available for any questions that you have.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, everybody. Let me summarize the intent and the process here on the policy. In terms of the intent, there are three key objectives that are in the policy. And this is dealing with what are essentially one-off or short-term items. One-off items being revenues that appear in an individual year that we don't think are recurring, but are benefits to the city. And general operating surplus means for a full year, for us the year that ends in June, when our performance is better than we were anticipating, and therefore we have a surplus for that period. And the question is, what policy or guidance should there be for the appropriation or designation of those funds, be they from a one-time revenue or be they from the annual operating surplus? Even though the nature of those benefits happen in different ways, they are both economic benefits to the city, and so we believe that they both should be dealt with in a similar way. Before going into this a little more, I should say we have had general fund operating surpluses in the most recent years, which is excellent short-term news, which makes this policy something that has some practicality and need. But I should also mention, as the chairman of the Finance Advisory Committee, we don't expect to have operating surpluses in the long term, and the fact that we've had them doesn't mean that our long-term financial position is buoyant and one that we should expect surpluses. So I think that's the context in which we should look at this. So the process, first of all, was that the ad hoc that included two council members, Murdoch and Kemps, met on 5 occasions, having been set up, and it had 2 FAC members also, and went through this in detail. As the city manager pressed, which indicated we did canvass what other cities do in these 2 areas in Southern California, led by Council Member Murdoch. We canvassed 22 cities, and the majority of those cities both had a one-time revenue policy as well as had a operating surplus policy. It wasn't like all of them did, but I think 14 of the 22 had their one-time revenue policy, and 12 of the 22 had the operating surplus policy. So we think what we are doing is not out of line with what our peers are doing in Southern California. So the key objectives of the policy were threefold, or are threefold. One is we want to make sure that we have a consistent focus on the appropriation of these beneficial amounts to what we have spent a significant amount of time working on, which is the long-range plan of the city. So this needs to be these short-term benefits and their appropriation need to be aligned with the long-term financial plan needs of the city. That's point one. Point two is, conversely, we want to provide some guidance so that future city councils aren't picking we call it a flavor of the week or a pet project to appropriate benefits to, because we want them to be aligned with the long-range financial plan and needs of our city. And thirdly, having said that, we do recognize that we can't anticipate the future, so the policy does need to provide some flexibility for future city councils to determine what makes the most sense to do at that time, given the needs of the city. So those are the objectives. In terms of how it works, or the mechanics, if you like, on the one-time revenues, it was decided that we can't match, monitor, and track and appropriate all one-time revenues, so there should be a significance level that was chosen at $200,000. It could be higher, it could be lower. That's about 1% of our annual budget, so we thought that was a reasonable amount. So anything that is below $200,000 won't be covered by this. It'll just essentially roll into what might become an operating surplus for the period. Anything above $200,000, any individual revenue would have a process, and that would be a discussion brought to the City Council within 90 days of receipt, then a discussion by the City Council as to how that should be appropriated. And the purpose there is to try and make sure that where we do have monies that come in, we don't have them sitting around waiting for some future event. We have a method to have them come to the council and have the council have the ability to appropriate, designate on a timely basis. So those are the one-time revenues. On the general fund operating surplus, we also are looking for some timely designation or appropriation. And so we had two ways of measuring or tracking this. The first is when we get essentially our annual report that's referred to as the annual comprehensive financial report. That's when you know the numbers for that year are absolutely final. Then, definitely when you get that, you should be able to, look at the numbers and appropriate. But also we look back and we know in the last fiscal year, June of 21, when the city had a slow audit process with new auditors, that final report took over a year to come about. And so we also put in a clause that would say after 5 months after the year end, so that would be November 30th, that the council would look at the surplus and make an appropriation process. So the goal of these two was to have monies not just sit around, but to make sure they are allocated, designated, timely, in accordance with the long-range financial needs. And then in terms of how you might allocate those, clearly if you have any needs that are designated, then those need to be followed in terms of the appropriation. Then when you get into what we would call item B, or the undesignated, within the undesignated world, we do have as a city two current requirements to make sure are fully funded. The first is a general fund emergency reserve that needs to be fully funded. And then secondly, we have a general fund operating reserve at a certain target level that needs to be fully funded. And so if there are these surpluses, the first thing the policy would say is you should make sure that these emergency reserve and operating reserve are fully funded. They happen to be fully funded at the moment, which is good, but that will be how it should be looked at from a waterfall standpoint. And then beyond that, the thinking was that the expenditures on projects should be allocated 30% to the unfunded pension, 30% to capital improvements, and 30% to parklands, and then the other 10% based upon which of those priorities or others appeared to be most important during the year in question. And then as a regulator for this, we also have at the bottom of the policy in the asterisk footnote that this will include recommendations that will come up from the city staff and the city manager. And so that what we're suggesting on the 30% is that we follow 3 known long-term needs that we have as a city, but equally that there is some flexibility for the city manager to weigh in and give input onto that before each of those surpluses is appropriated. Let me stop there. I don't know whether Councilmember Murdoch or Kemps from our ad hoc have any additional thoughts or comments.
Actually, I was going to call on them. So I did want to thank the ad hoc committee, Councilmember Murdoch and Councilmember Kemps. I know you put a lot of time into this, and thank you, Chair Nendek, for the good report, and we appreciate that. But I do want to ask the members of our ad hoc, do you guys have anything to add, or would you like to add something?
I thought, John, you did an excellent job explaining this. What started out as nebulous and unclear as we worked through it, I think you did a great job making it understandable. And really what our attempt here is to make sure that we are applying our funds in ways that will serve our residents rather than sitting fallow in accounts. And so wanting to make sure we're providing those services. So thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Appreciated the collaboration. Tried to think forward and think about future councils, not even necessarily about us, and try to design this policy from the standpoint of looking at applying these percentages, in particular in Section 3, fairly across these areas, and then leaving a little bit room for the city manager to provide input and direction. So thank you for the collaboration, and to Councilmember Murdoch, thank you for the deep dive on the other cities. That's all you.
Good, okay. So sit tight for a second. So let me take public comment at this point. Is there any public comment? No, don't everybody jump up. Okay, never mind. We'll bring it back. Okay, so I think we, oops. So do we have, so what are you looking for? Is just, yes, we agree with the approach, or we're ready for this to go to resolution? Maybe I'll ask the city manager to lead us through what our end game is here.
Sorry, the end game would be, if you're comfortable with the policy as it's written, to pass a motion that would authorize adoption of the policy.
Oh, okay.
By adopting the resolution.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, yeah, so all right, let's bring it back for discussion. What comments, Jim?
I have a couple questions. What are, could you guys explain maybe, or Chair Nemdick, what is intended by parklands uses?
My response to that would be the same categorization as was used a couple of years ago when we allocated the 500,000 to parklands, but.
So it would be fire abatement, landscape maintenance, and tree trimming. I mean, if we need to be more specific, that's actually probably a good suggestion, because that could be interpreted many ways. It's not development.
Yeah, it just struck me as a lot of those things are kind of operational.
Yeah, but we've already, but part of it is getting, cleaning up, taking care of deferred things, and
I know where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
Maybe we just need to, I know what it means, I think.
I think we've, on that point, I think because we had specifically said, hey, when we, so I guess in the past 2 years, we've sort of on just an ad hoc basis said, okay, we have a surplus, what do we want to do with that? And we've put some money aside. So, this is kind of putting a policy around that, right? But we were very specific, especially when it came to parklands, that allocation was not, and you touch on it in this policy, which says this is not for, it's not just to throw surpluses into operations, and, so, so far we've allocated $1 million to parklands uses. We've spent a little bit, but what we've spent has been to supplement operations. And so I think when we did that, did we have that item at our last meeting, their last meeting or the meeting before? It must have been the last one, because we had the Travers item on tonight. So I get a little uncomfortable if it's sort of like, okay, here's more money. So I'd want some more structure around that. And I don't know if we probably don't have to put this in this policy, but I think we should be careful. I think we have to be specific.
I agree, and it's a little bit of a slippery slope, because I think the same is true with capital improvement. A lot of our, in our capital improvement projects, plan, whatever it is, there's streets, and streets could be considered an operating or an ongoing thing, or, maintenance of sewers and stuff like that. And so it's not black and white, at least in the way that I see it.
So then it could be used to supplement operations. Is that allowed for in the policy?
I think the concept is, it is not, the purpose of the policy, it's not meant to cover what should be normal operations, but if we have deferred maintenance because we haven't been doing things, then it can, be a one-time supplement to try and catch us up on those things we haven't been done. You could argue the same thing about the pension item, because part of a pension is a normal operating, but what we're talking about here is the is the topping up or the better funding of that. So I think the parklands probably is similar in concept, but I concur it's not explicitly clear in the write-up here as to what would be included or not.
Sorry, Jim, I jumped in on you. Go ahead. Yeah, I think you.
I have just one more question. The language in 3A, any required payments, what are required payments that were, any required payments related to unfunded accrued liabilities? Is that just a reference to our pension funding policy?
What are you referencing?
Where are you? 3A, okay, designated, and then 3A.
Well, our pension funding policy currently stipulates that when the pensions are not funded, when the pensions are funded below 90%, 30% of the operating surplus will be an additional payment towards the pension.
Okay, so that-
we have another policy that's already.
It's a fulfillment of.
And it's the same 30%.
It's the same 30%.
It's not another 30%.
No, it's.
I
so
did
it-
read
so
that
it's-
sentence, I thought, wait a minute.
We wanted to make sure that we had the connectivity, and part of it is because the pension funding policy doesn't cover one-time revenue, it only covers operating surpluses. So we wanted to make sure there wasn't a gap there that we hadn't filled.
So what does the language, any required payments, mean?
If our pension funding policy says that when we're funded under 90%, we have to
Okay, so
make
you're
a 30% of an operating surplus payment to the UAL, that would be a required payment according to that policy.
Okay.
Wait a minute. So, and David, I'm sorry, I know you're trying to get in here. So when we have one-time revenue, let's say like ARPA money, first of all, you can't pay down your pension with ARPA money, but, you know, I know you've tried to put, I think, and I made a note to myself, and you said one of the goals was to have one policy for both one-time revenue and general fund surplus. And I made a note to myself saying, you know, I don't know, question mark about that being one policy.
And I would just add on that, Mayor, that they both reside in this one proposed policy, but the methods of appropriating them are not one and the same.
See, I would also say, though, that if this is where we got to with the designated, right? So ARPA, in essence, could be defined as designated, or at least restricted, right? So if ARPA says you have to use it for these types of things, obviously you wouldn't do pensions if that wasn't allowed. So
Okay,
I'm
but
not
if it
concerned
were
about-
allowed, I don't think I would want 30% of my ARPA money to go to additional pension payment or any bucket, but without some discussion. Yeah, see, I think the one time, I see where you're coming from on the, you know, you kind of, the one-time revenue and the operating surplus, but I think I look at those two things differently, or at least I have looked at those two things differently in the past. I'm going to hold that thought because I know David wants to speak.
Yeah, let me just comment on, generally, I like the direction this policy is going and putting some clarification around these specialized funds. What I'm unclear on, and John, maybe you can help me understand this, the allocations of 30, 30, and 10, are those locked in every time or not? Because as I think forward, we may have a situation where we may need more than the 30% if there were such a surplus for a particular area, and what flexibility will future councils have in order to accommodate those needs? Does that go back to the city manager and his recommendation, or how does that get dealt with?
Let me start to answer that, then I'll hand it to the city manager, because we had the same discussion at a meeting last week. So
I guess I'm not the only one thinking that way.
I mean, I think the idea of having the 30, 30, 30, 10 is we know that currently these are shortages or needs in our long-range financial plan, and so we wanted to give some guidelines versus just opting out on that. But my understanding is there is some flexibility that will come via the city manager, and that's what our footnote at the foot of the policy was intended to provide, but let me hand it over to the city manager for that.
If I can just hitchhike on what you just said, and Mark, maybe you can address this. What I'm worried about are competing priorities. We may end up with a situation where one of those three categories has an immediate priority or a need for more funding, and how would we address that properly? And then I have another follow-on question later on for something else, but go ahead, Mark.
So, as Chair Nendek indicated, a similar question was asked at the Finance Advisory Committee by a member, and we pointed to the phrase, "It is expected the council will act." When you read into that phrase, what we're anticipating is you may have other priorities, and you may not necessarily want to act right now. You may potentially act in other ways. But we've tried to create some flexibility for you, and as a policy, it's a guideline. It's not required by law. You have flexibility to adjust and adapt, and so the intent behind that language is to provide that very flexibility. What we think is valuable is that a group of people have spent a lot of time thinking about ways to do some pre-thinking, essentially, on what if we find ourselves in this situation, to help guide those future policy conversations. But yes, the council will always have the flexibility to decide how to apply any surplus or one-time revenue.
That makes me feel much more comfortable.
David, can one other piece of this, and that's why we built in the flexibility, is if you recall on the pension funding policy, once we hit 90% funding of the pension plans, then actually only 10% gets put aside for future things. So we needed to have that flexibility. So then that 30 goes down to 10, and then, future councils can figure out how to allocate the remaining 20 or whatever. But because we knew there were going to be a bunch of different scenarios depending on needs.
What worries me is as we get into the long-range plan and we get all the needs properly identified and at least preliminarily quantified, there's going to be a competition for scarce resources. And it may or may not fall into one of these three buckets, or one bucket could be high priority to utilize potentially all of it. But I mean, those are the things that we need to keep in balance so that as we go forward and we look at the various challenges the city will be facing in the future, that we have the wherewithal and flexibility to accommodate those. And I think that's what Mark was telling me we have.
Well, and that's also why we put in, because we also wanted to acknowledge that, the new path forward is every year, council does a work plan and sets priorities for that year, and so we wanted to make sure something might pop up as part of that too, that we might want to use.
But what I'm referring to, Don, is more than a one-year plan.
I understand that.
We have to look at the long range and look at the priorities and balancing that as we look over the horizon, and we may need to be socking money away into a sinking fund for a future need that could command a good portion of these kinds of funds.
I think I wouldn't mind a provision or something in there that says every year we're going to reassess what that percentage is, the 30, 30, 30, 10. What I don't like sometimes about putting, a specific number in a policy is you don't want to constantly fiddle with it. You want a policy that you can work with, right? You don't want to say, oh, I put this policy in place and 6 months from now I'm going to change it because I don't like it anymore, right? I mean, I don't like how that looks. That's not very disciplined.
Well, and that's interesting, because when we looked at the policies out there were some that were, just use them for not operating things, and there was some that had these really complicated formulas. You do this, and then you take 10% of that, you do this, and so we tried to find something in the middle.
Yeah.
I think, Mr. Mayor, that I view this as a guidance, the 30, 30, 30 or whatever, and it will be evaluated periodically, whether it's annually or every 4 years or whatever the need is. But I do have another question for Mr. Nendek.
you're on the hot
Well, just
button.
finishing that point, though, does it actually say we're going to look at, we're going to assess, reassess?
It doesn't, but we could add, with
It'd
my...
be nice to have a sentence or two that said, or how about we, because, just how we've been doing it, we, kind of every year we sit down, we say, okay, here's this money, how are we going to allocate it? And we just so happen to have allocated it the same way the last 2 years. But you could have a conversation that says, well, you know what, this year, I think we're going to have to do more of this and less of that. And, yes.
I agree.
Can we put a couple sentences in that allow for that? Without blowing up the policy?
Depending on the extent of the edits tonight, we can capture notes. If it's if it's something that we can capture tonight, we can integrate that. But we may need to bring it back if there's additional, too many additional edits.
Yeah, and as Councilmember McGowan
Can I ask
pointed
a
out,
simple question?
Well, hold on.
I was going to say, as Councilmember McGowan pointed out, this is a policy, it's guidance, it can't bind a future council in any case, so you don't need to have provisions in there stating those kinds of things, if you do want to get this through tonight.
Well, and what's the point of a policy if we're going to revisit it and change it every year?
Well,
Then
that's
it's not a
kind of was my
policy.
point. It's like, well, if you're going to, yeah. So, okay. David, you said you had another?
Yeah, I have one other question, and this relates to the fact that the proposed ordinance or the proposed motion starts with today's date. And what have we decided to do with those funds that have been previously one-time funds that we've earmarked as, I call them specially designated funds, and I know Mr. Hanna has a different term with the accounting firm, but whatever we're calling it now. But I go back to the Southern California Edison 675 is a good example, and I think there was one or two other that come to my mind. But I assume that will be rolled under this adopted proposal?
If the question from
Maybe it's not for
McGowan is addressed to me, I would have imagined whatever has been previously appropriated will stay. We do have an expected surplus of around $2 million for the year that has ended in June, and so if we were following this policy by the end of this month, we would have a plan for that. So I wouldn't think we'd be undoing anything that had been done in the past, but I would think it would be prospective. But
Can I get, I want to get clarification from you, though, about what you're asking, because are you asking about the things that we put in the general fund assigned balance for capital improvement, and then the one that we did for the other? Are you talking about the famous $675,000 and all those other little stashes of money that exist?
A couple of years ago, we started off with, I believe it was 675, correct me if I'm wrong. That was monies that we received by selling some buried cable rights to another community.
California Edison, yep.
And it was a one-time money, and we, as the council, at that point in time, it was, I think, before you joined the council, Don, that we wanted that set up as, I called it a board-designated fund, which is a terminology that's used in a lot of organizations. But under the municipal, there's a different terminology for it. But the auditors have that segregated as a restricted fund of some nature.
I think it's called Victoria's money.
It is not Victoria's money. I knew you were going to say that.
Well, then I want to apply for it.
No. No, I just didn't want
Stephen, can you
anyone
help
throwing
me?
it in the operating fund.
Can you help, you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's in something called assigned fund balance, and from time to time, the city will put resources aside that have not been appropriated or have not been determined how they're going to be used into an assigned fund balance account, which is where the 675 was, or is, not was, sorry.
Still there.
And where the ARPA money has also been placed. In addition, you have assigned fund balance amounts for the unused parklands and the CapEx money that council has appropriated over the last couple of years, because they have not programmed or decided on an exact use they want to use those funds for. So until council decides how they want to use this funding source or these funding sources, they'll remain in those accounts. Once they've decided to tap those funding sources for a specific project or one-time use, then we will release that, and they will go along with appropriation and use those funds for that purpose.
My only thought or suggestion would be that we might want to, whatever motion that we end up making, we might want to incorporate these pre-existing
designations so that we have a clean slate moving forward.
Probably makes sense.
So you're saying to go ahead and include any ARPA funds in this cable thing so nothing gets grandfathered? Anything that's hanging out in limbo?
What I'm trying to articulate is that if we're going to have a policy going forward as to how we deal with these specialized funds, we already have a bucket of those specialized funds on the balance sheet right now. And all I'm suggesting is that we incorporate that so we have a clean slate. So otherwise, we're going to have two different buckets, so to speak, that will make it more complicated and convoluted to manage going forward.
Okay. Councilmember Kemps?
That action, though, would not actually take and make a decision to spend or apply or utilize those funds, right? I just want to be clear.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think I'm on board with taking the ARPA money and just putting it in the 30-30-10.
Well, we can
Is that what you
leave,
mean?
we can leave the ARPA money segregated because
Or
it
my
probably
6
needs to be, because it's got restrictions to it.
Actually, the 675, I actually do think we said we were going to, did we say half pension, half capital improvement? We might have.
No, we didn't.
No, I don't think you would ever let us touch that money.
No.
I might let you touch it someday.
That was 2 jokes tonight. I need room for one more.
And
Okay.
Councilmember McGowan, the comments you have with respect to this year's numbers and any prior year allocations, we can bring that type of a policy conversation forward at a
Let's
later
treat that
date
separately. Yeah.
Specifically, I think initially with the FY22 close on June 30th. So these are the numbers that we would speak to first. But essentially what the policy would do is move those, let's say, $2 million to various buckets. One might be the pension bucket, one might be the capital improvement bucket, et cetera. And then subsequent conversations would occur on how to appropriate those funds to specific projects.
Okay, what you just said, if you appropriate monies to one of the buckets, say pensions, that doesn't mean we're paying down the pensions with that money at that point in time, or does it?
Pensions are a little different than the other two.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Did you want to add to that?
I was going to say that our practice has been to use those funds to pay down the pension debt as they are made available to us. And that is in line with the pension funding policy at this point in time. The other buckets that are listed on this policy, the Parklands, the CapEx, and the 10%, are more project-specific or specific use that still has to be tapped by council before they can be spent. So until those funds until there's a determination exactly how they're going to be spent, they'll sit and assigned, waiting for that determination to be made by this council and future councils.
I have concerns about immediately moving that into those designated buckets without understanding all the priorities that the city is facing in the future. And I don't want to see us put monies into a bucket that we cannot, if a catastrophe happened a week from now, that we don't have the flexibility in order to utilize some of those funds to accommodate that need.
Well, I think we're saying today, those are the 3 priority buckets, right? I mean, and we're leaving ourselves, some kind of unrestricted or the other.
And our reserve funds are 50% of the operating budget. That's a lot of money if there's a catastrophe. The 700,000 or $1 million that goes to pensions isn't.
Well, I would say that we should, with fiscal year 22, year that just ended in June, and that surplus, I think that's the first chunk of money that we're going to apply this policy to. I think we have to have maybe other discussions on things like.
Actually, I think there's June 2021 surplus we have not addressed yet. Because that's the one that the ACFR was released in August.
2021, but we did. We did in the last budget process. We
Did
did
we?
allocate money. Yeah,
Oh,
we
okay,
did.
sorry, my bad.
We did. It probably didn't allocate all of it.
Did it in
according
advance
to
of the...
But we did.
Yeah, okay.
So we could fine tune that, yeah. So I think we should, go forward and then have a different discussion about, okay, what do we do with all this kind of stuff that we had in the past? But I actually had a question about the audit piece, because it gave me a little bit of, when we talked about, let's say by November 30th, 5 months after the end of the fiscal year, if the audit wasn't finished, we would still appropriate the surplus. I mean, to me, I don't know, I was uncomfortable with that. It seems like you'd want the audit to be done. Would we adjust later if the audit produced I know you probably by 5 months after, you're probably fairly confident of the number, but,
There's no excuse for the audit not being done after.
well, there's that point.
That's it.
I do not disagree with that statement, but I think the intent of this was in the event that the numbers were not firm enough for council to take action on it during the budget process, it provided them a little bit more time to solidify the amounts they wanted to allocate. That was the point of giving out to November of that year. It's still the same surplus you would have been acting on during the budget process that year, but you're giving yourself a little bit more time to specifically identify what it's going to be used for. It's just something to help keep focused on those items so that we don't lose track of them, and make sure that for that fiscal year that those amounts are programmed for the purpose that the council wants them to be programmed for.
Okay. Any other thoughts? What do we want to do?
So-
Pretty good.
I have a few notes here that we'll need some clarity on before you act. One is whether to further define parklands. So one example of that might be to add a parentheses that says fire mitigation, for example, fire mitigation, weed abatement, landscape maintenance. Just a concept, but that's one potential edit.
I think you need to include trees in there.
Trees.
I don't know about landscape maintenance.
Yeah, I would take out the landscape maintenance. I think it's
Okay.
more fire and weed abatement and the tree trimming.
Done?
Sorry, question. Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Ruse, just to clarify your parklands question, is where you were going, trying to avoid operational expenses and trying to invest in projects?
Trying to avoid operational expenses,
In an effort to fund projects?
right?
Right. So my concern is the wording I just heard would lean more towards operational expenses than projects, and I'm not sure that it accomplishes what you were trying to do.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, I think that what John said about some of the deferred maintenance kind of stuff, which is, I mean, that seems like a legitimate use here.
Let's catch up.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the list then, deferred maintenance, and then somewhere in as directed by council or something like that.
So instead of the specific pseudo-operational references, something that would instead say, for example, deferred maintenance as directed by council?
I like that.
Okay.
Here's a question, though. So getting back to the for example is not exhaustive, right? It's, for example, but something like a tree inventory or a tree management program or tree planting or something, that would all still qualify, right, under parklands?
I would think.
For example, special projects and deferred maintenance?
Yeah.
That's good.
Then we say projects. That's actually good.
And I think, sorry to jump in, I'm not sure this is the protocol, but in the policy part of the document, we do state that will not be used to fund ongoing operations. And so when we're looking at parklands, implicit in that is that we shouldn't be looking at an ongoing operation item in parklands when we're appropriating.
Okay.
Did you have something else, Mark?
No, but I was thinking about sort of public education related to weed abatement, fire mitigation, those types of issues, or even tree trimming. If hypothetically a video was developed, that's a good example of a special project. It's probably something that would last for several years. So I think that would be a good example of something that could aid parklands, for example.
Agree.
And then there was the reference to the consideration of reassessing funding levels, and I don't know if you've formally...
Do you guys still want that or no? We kind of talked through it.
No.
Okay, nope, that's fine. You can take that up.
And that's all I have.
No, so actually then, if you guys like the policy, we can probably approve it if we like it, because we really have only made one little edit to define parklands, right?
Mhm. Although I'd take off the V5.
The what?
The V5 in the title. The draft ad hoc V5.
It will be formatted.
David, you look like you're still thinking over there. Did you have another comment? Or concern?
I'm looking at the resolution versus the document. My preference would be to have it edited and we revisit it, would be my personal preference, yes. But if you want to go forward with it, I'll go. I just don't want to I want to make sure that we're not locking ourselves into any designating funds until we understand all the competing priorities. I keep repeating that, but and when we talk about issues with, trees and parklands and fire mitigation, I fully appreciate that, but then I look around the building we're sitting in with the deferred maintenance and the risks associated with this structure, and if one day we wake up and we say we got to spend X dollars to fix this environment that we're sitting in at this moment, or replace the chairs we're sitting on, that we've got the ability to do so. I just don't want to see us handcuff this council or future councils for being able to do that. That's my only question.
Right. This council has no legal ability to handcuff a future council.
That's true.
So,
The policy could always be changed.
The policy could always be changed.
Yep.
A future council could say, no, we're not doing 30-30-10. They could say whatever they want.
We could do that.
Or we could do that.
Yeah.
They could say in the future that, geez, we have a fiscal issue that we need to solve, and we're not going to do that. We're going to take this and apply it directly to, whatever. The building you mentioned.
I think for right now, our priorities are equally divided between pension, capital improvement, and
But I
parklands,
think
for
that-
now.
Yeah, and my only suggestion is that could change
Sure.
within months.
We could certainly discuss it, for sure.
Could be years.
Could be years, could be months, absolutely. I'm probably okay with the policy, actually. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Okay.
On board?
I'm on board.
On board? On board? Okay, can we have a motion
So
then?
and so in addition to, and I can read you the notes, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mayor. We have one staff additional recommendation to change one word.
Oh.
But in the motion, we would add this would be to the parklands uses under the use of one-time revenue and general fund operating surplus, B3C, parklands uses. We would add the phrase, for example, special projects and deferred maintenance as directed by council. And then if you look at objective C at the top of the policy, the phrase some flexibility for adjustment and updating, we would recommend considering changing the word some to provide flexibility for adjustment, in case that's of interest.
Where was that second one again?
It would be the first word under
okay.
objectives, section, item C.
I would just, well, I
I
would
think the intent is
recommend,
that it reads well today, now with the way the first sentence is phrased, but in case you would like to have a slightly stronger statement there.
so we could just get rid of the word some, right? Yeah. All right, so I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we adopt the one-time revenue and general fund surplus policy as presented with 2 changes. That statement B3C, add the term, for example, special projects and deferred maintenance as determined by council, and that under the objectives, for objective C, we remove the word some.
Okay, is there a second?
Friendly amendment that it includes the adoption of the associated resolution. Yeah.
Accepted.
And is that a second, Councilmember Kemp?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, good. Well, thank you again for your work, really. I mean, that was a lot of work, and Chair Nendick and your committee, thank you. You know, it's good to see, well, let's see, other people do all the work and then bring us the finished product. Just kidding. No, very good work, and I think it accomplished what we needed it to accomplish, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I know we only have 2 items left, but we've been at it over a couple hours. Does anyone need 5 minutes?
Let's get it done.
I never say no to a break.
Five for
Five.
water would be great.
5 minutes.
4 and a
Okay.
quarter.
Great, we are back. Thank you. All right, on to item number 10, which is a really long title for saying that we are going to have a presentation on California building standards.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
think we have, our Chief Building Official, Charles Yotto.
Hi, good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Carlos Yotto, and I am the building official for the City of Palos Verdes Estates as contracted by H.R. Green. And tonight we're bringing before you an introduction of an ordinance amending Title 15 of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code. Next slide. Starting on the background, the California Building Standards Code, also known as Title 24, establishes the minimum regulations for the design and construction of building and structures in California. These codes include building, fire, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, energy, green building, and the residential code. The State of California Health and Safety Code mandates that the California Building Standards Commission adopts and publish the California Building Standards Code every 3 years, to which then the city is required to adopt these said codes. Next slide. In addition to the Title 24, the city is also adopting the following: the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code, the 2021 Uniform Swimming Pool, Spa, and Hot Tub Code, the 2020 Los Angeles County Fire Code. These facilitate consistency with neighboring agencies who also adopt similar codes, and the LA County Code. The city adopted the current 2019 code in November of 2019. So 3 years ago, we were here presenting in November for the code adoption. The 2022 California Building Standards Code will go into effect January 1 of 2023. Any applications for plan review submitted prior to January 1 will be reviewed under the current 2019 building codes. Any proposed amendments are administrative in nature and consistent with previous amendments adopted by the City Council. Next slide. Some of the noteworthy changes, not much changed in this code cycle. Compared to the 2019 code, we had significant changes, but in 2022, it's just kind of some very minor changes, but as always, the energy code makes some changes. One of them including the 2022 California Energy Code has new requirements for new single-family homes to be electric ready. So this includes electrical circuits for space heating. This is actually supposed to be saying water heating, cooking ovens, and clothes dryers. And then along with that is the photovoltaic systems that can be adapted to that load for the electric wiring. The 2022 California Energy Code has new requirements for new single-family homes to be energy storage systems ready. This requires additional features that will allow enough capacity to connect an energy storage system. So residents would be required to put in a 225 amp panel. They would have to have a 60 amp subfeed dedicated for future circuits for an energy storage system. And then the 2022 California Green Building Code EV charging station requirements made some minor changes to single-family dwelling units, but more significant changes to multifamily units, including level 2 chargers, the number of chargers, and the capacity to add future EV charging stations. So staff recommendations: approve the first reading and introduce the ordinance amending specific sections of Title 15 of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code, and set a public hearing date of November 22nd, 2022 for adoption of said ordinance. Last slide. And that's all. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So if the code now says that every home has to be electric ready, is there anything requiring solar energy or anything like that? Because I'm just wondering where all this electricity is going to come from.
So the energy code is steering away from natural gas usage because then the code already has in place for new single-family dwelling units to require them to install photovoltaic or solar systems. So now that they're lessening the requirement for a gas water heater or gas appliances. If it's electric and then the home also has a photovoltaic system that's designed to basically be zero net energy, designed to take on that demand from the electric appliances, then we can get closer to the zero net energy goals that the energy code is trying to accomplish.
So to clarify, did you say that they are requiring it or they're encouraging it?
No, current code requires so under the 2019 California Energy Code, for new single-family dwelling units, it's required to have a PV system installed. That matches the output capacity. There's some calculations involved, but it matches basically whatever energy I'm using. I have to have a PV system that can meet that capacity. So I'm at zero net energy with my house.
Okay, so I'm a layperson, so that means they need to have solar panels?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And is that just new buildings, or is that remodels? I mean, who all's going to have to be putting in solar?
That's only requirement for new single-family dwelling units. So even if you have a new accessory dwelling unit, that would require, because it's a new structure, or new single-family dwelling units would require, under the current code, to have photovoltaic system or solar systems required.
And then do we have a very clear definition of what constitutes new construction versus remodels?
So So new construction is, when the energy code defines new construction, it's literally a brand new, from foundation all the way up. That's considered new construction in terms of applying these code requirements for photovoltaic systems.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So, under current, let me just run through that again. Under current code, a new built ADU absolutely must include solar panels, correct?
Yes.
And therefore, if a newly built ADU does not have solar panels, that ADU is illegal. Is that correct?
There are certain exceptions to the requirements under current code, so it just varies based upon the conditions. There's exceptions like if I build an ADU and my neighbor's house adjacent is casting a large shadow, or there's trees or something that reduce the capacity to be able to have a productive solar system, then that would meet one of the exceptions. So not all new ADUs that don't have solar would be considered illegal because they might have fallen under a certain, I think there's probably about 5 or 6 exceptions to that requirement.
And not to dive too deep into these weeds, but as our building inspector is employed by your firm, let me just ask you this. Are you currently looking at that compliance and validating it and ensuring that we're following that piece?
So when an applicant submits a set of drawings, we actually vet it through the plan check process initially. So our plan checkers are verifying compliance of requiring the solar that meets the current code, and then our inspectors go out on those approved plans to confirm that it's been built per the approved plans.
So could I make a request that doesn't have to be answered now?
Certainly.
Could you and staff get back to us with an update? How many ADUs have been built as new, and how many of those are compliant or have exceptions with those solar requirements?
Yes, we can certainly look into that.
Okay.
And can I just build on that for 1 second, please? So when we're talking new ADUs, I don't think we're talking only about freestanding. We're talking even if they build it as an addition to the house. Is that new construction? Because they have to pour a foundation.
No, so that would be considered an alteration to the existing structure if they're.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a detached new ADU is what would require the solar.
Thank you.
And then to the EV question, I'm sorry, could you back up a slide? Another slide.
One more, yeah.
There we go. So the 2022 code requires what exactly relative to EV charging stations?
So the current 2019 code already requires you to have future capacity to install an EV charging station. So people are required to have a raceway to the garage with a dedicated circuit that can be used for future EV charging stations. In 2022, they didn't really make any changes to single family. The main changes were to multifamily units for additional units or even including level 2 chargers.
Okay, let me dumb this down. Let's go back to 2019.
Sure.
So I find an existing home, and it was built in, I don't know, 1982. That's my favorite example here. And I'm going to remodel that home, and I put together a set of plans. I have 2 gas-powered vehicles and have no intention of buying an EV. I'm required to provide power for a future EV in my garage, even though I don't have one, and I have to have enough electrical capacity and amperage in my panel to satisfy that, even though I have no intention in my home that I have no intention of selling or using an EV. I have to do that anyway. Is that correct?
Let me clarify, that's only for new structures.
Okay, so in that remodel scenario, the answer is no, you don't?
No.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
David, any questions?
No.
So just to,
I don't think we have much of a choice. It's the law.
so just out of curiosity, in that same scenario, if it's a 2022 home, brand-new construction, and I really love my gas guzzler, I've still got to put in the EV, go through all that expense, even though I am going to kick and scream as long as I can and keep my gas car?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think I read somewhere in the staff report, I thought I did, that of course we have to adopt the California standards, but we do have the option of being more restrictive than the California standards. Is there any are there any areas where you recommend that we be more restrictive?
We like to stay consistent with the model code that the state puts out, just because our neighboring cities do the same, and so and we also are under the umbrella of the LA County, so we work with their fire department on their county code. But in terms of making local amendments, the only major one that we really make is the requirement for not allowing aluminum wiring, just given the nature of our location and being in a coastal community. But otherwise, no other further amendments are really needed because the model code itself covers us enough.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry, public comment. Karen Logan.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council. The one thing I was thinking about, and we may not have any leeway here, but we just have a lot of historical buildings in our community, and those would include multi-family dwelling units. So I just don't know if there's any opportunity just to think a little circumspectly about those historical elements. It seems like most of these code changes have to do with new buildings, but I'm not really sure about the EV. And anyway, I was just thinking about that as I was listening to the presentation about the historical buildings we have of different types. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Carlos, can you address that?
So under Title 24, there is the State Historical Building Code that does take into consideration ensuring that the built community in a historic preservation or a historic structure, we can still maintain the character defining features without ruining the integrity of the historical aspects of the building. So in your example about the EV charging stations in a historical building, again, that was referenced strictly to new buildings, so it wouldn't be required. But if somebody wanted to install an EV charging station in a historical structure, they would have to go through, planning review and then also through building review as well.
Sure, thank you. Okay, if we don't have any other discussion, I think. Okay.
One more question. I was under the impression that we actually did have building codes that are different from the state's building codes. Is that, like we have like exception-based things, or we go into a different level of detail? Is that
So the local amendments that we have made are based on mainly like a design component, so like our risk category, where we're located, the wind speed. So those are the specific changes that we make relative to our climatic or geological location. But otherwise, we just try to stay consistent with the state code, and that helps us just in the building department or building industry. It helps us remain consistent as we go from agency to agency.
But those exceptions or whatever nuances, they carry over. They don't get supplanted by this new code or overwritten, right? We still are.
No, you're right. They're there with the city from the time we make that determination. We're just carrying those past approvals from past council through.
Good. Would someone like to make a motion? And we are, sorry, just to clarify, we're introducing this on first reading, correct? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Somebody answer.
I'll do it.
One nodded, okay. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the first reading and introduction of an ordinance entitled, do I have to read the whole thing?
I have to read the whole thing.
Go ahead.
So this would be ordinance number 22-759, an ordinance of the City of Palos Verdes Estates amending Title 15 Buildings and Construction of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code by adopting by reference the 2022 California Building, Residential, Electrical, Mechanical, Plumbing, Energy, Green Building, Historical Building, and Existing Building Codes, the 2022 California Reference Standards, the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code, the 2021 Uniform Swimming Pool, Spa, and Hot Tub Code, amending Chapter 8.12, the Fire Code of Title 8, Health and Safety of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code by adopting by reference the 2020 Los Angeles County Fire Code, ratifying the more restrictive building standards contained in that code, and delegating enforcement of the fire code in the city to the fire chief, and amending Chapter 13.14, Sanitary Sewer and Industrial Waste, to Title 13, Public Services of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code to adopt by reference the Los Angeles County Sanitary Sewers and Industrial Waste Ordinance, Title 20, Division 2, Los Angeles County Code.
And set a public hearing date of November 22nd, 2022 for adoption of said ordinance.
Second. What he said.
Yeah, could you say that again? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, no, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
You so much, Carlos, for the presentation.
Yep,
We
thank you.
appreciate it. Very informative. Okay. Item number 11. Discuss and approve or provide guidance to refine a proposed scope of work for inclusion in an enterprise resource planning, ERP, software selection and implementation project manager request for proposal. May we have a staff report, and I believe that would be Mr. Hanna, correct?
Yes, it would. Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, we have an item for you tonight to do, as the mayor just referenced, discuss and/or approve or provide guidance to refine a proposed scope of work for inclusion in an ERP software selection and implementation project manager, RFP. Just a little background, the city's been operating on the same basic software package since 2007. There was at least one upgrade during that period. Originally it was sold under the company name SunGard. We are the fourth generation company. It's been sold 4 times in probably the last 8 years. And there's been some issues with that particular company, but they've improved somewhat recently. The proposed software is identified, or replacement is identified as a high priority in the City Council's 2022-23 work plan. And following selection of the city's ERP project manager, the project manager would be asked to assist in finalizing the ERP RFP also, just because I believe it's very important for that person to have some say in what is in that particular document. This is the first of what would likely be many staff reports related to this project, which will last several years at a minimum. The intent here is to provide as much transparency to council and the public here to as to what the status is. This particular item is to help ensure an efficient, unbiased process and support transition to a new software project. It's recommended the city issue an RFP for this purpose and assist with management, and find someone to assist with the management of the software selection, implementation, and post-implementation processes. Goals of the project include improved operational efficiency, data availability, and data transparency, in particular those last two, which will provide a lot of efficiencies, time savings for city staff throughout the process, throughout all the processes year-round. City plans to apply at a minimum the following criteria in selecting the ERP project manager. We're looking at project management experience, including certification, which I did not clearly state in here, but there is certification for that particular item, and current certification. Technical knowledge, functional technical knowledge, product-specific knowledge, meaning having a knowledge of certain software packages that we're looking at. Management and interpersonal skills, which I'm failing at right now, are also very important because of their need to interact with staff and population, the public, and with the council itself. With that being said, we've provided a draft scope of work to council to look at as what would be part of or main component of the RFP for selecting a project manager. And staff is available for answering any questions that council may have.
Thank you. One thing I noticed in the staff report, unless I missed it, we have an idea how much we're going to have to pay for this consultant?
You did ask me this about a year ago.
Oh, no wonder it sounds familiar.
Yes. At that time, we had received information from 3 different companies of what they thought that cost would be. I suspect that that number is well on the low range now because things have changed so much in the economic environment as a whole. That time, we thought it would be between $125,000 to $150,000. I think it's probably at least that much now because of the length of time this project will take more than anything else. If we can get a project plan that's executable, and if we can identify all the specific milestones that are necessary, and that's not just milestones of achievement related to the implementation of the plan, but it's also milestones related to the acquisition of backfill staff, when they're going to be in, having them in place, trained in place so we can roll staff into the project, roll it through. If that could all be fit together properly, the cost can come down because the project manager's time would be reduced substantially in that case. Just getting to that point could be very difficult given the staffing levels the city has.
Yep.
Stephen, can you share with us, if we were to approve this evening, how quickly the RFP could hit the street, and when would we realistically have responses so that we could accelerate the progression of this project?
I'm guessing that we would probably, based on, the amount of internal review and so forth that we would want to do, we'd probably have an RFP ready for final draft status within 30 days. That would be my guess. If we can get approval for release sometime in the first quarter next year, we'd have a project manager that we could select.
So you're saying we could have an RFP on the street by November 30. That's 30 days from now, a little more.
That would be the hope.
And it would take how long to get responses back from the...
I would set a response date back probably mid-January, simply because the holiday season's going to really cause some difficulty in getting responses back. That allows us for 4 or 5 weeks to score and go through the RFPs, including the use of, I believe, the ad hoc committee has been established for this, and then making a selection, and then you have contract negotiations, so forth, to go along with that prior to getting that person in.
The vendors that you're anticipating sending the RFP to, are they vendors that operate in the municipal arena versus the corporate arena for ERP?
I think in our case, we would want specifically those who operate in the municipal arena.
I agree. Thank you.
Piggybacking on that, so are we actually selecting who we're going to send it to, or is there another channel that we can use? I know with Public Works, we've used some other channels.
Sometimes you'll target a portion of your announcement for an RFP to certain people, but you're always going to put it out in more general population. The intent is to get as many responses, qualified responses as possible, so you have...
So will that go out on Planet Bids?
Yeah, I think it probably would, yeah.
Any questions? Michael?
How long does an implementation like this typically take in a city of our size?
If the contract was in place at exactly the right time, it's conceivable you could get the entire thing complete, including HR payroll, within a 14-month period, in a perfect world. My guess is you're looking at a 21 to 33-month project.
I struggle with this because my firm implements document management systems in law firms that are 15 times the size of the city in 6 months. And so when I see the long, drawn-out time frame that's involved, and I understand that it's ERP, but those same law firms take less than a year to fully transition and implement new accounting systems. So in a city that's 50-odd people, with half of it being the police department, I struggle with the length and the size of the timeline and want to find ways to find efficiencies that reduce cost, because I think we're taking this on like we're
Reinventing the wheel.
Torrance.
Yeah, custom, yeah.
Torrance. And we're little PVE. So while I understand, that a lot of the standards and recommendations and things will probably be similar but smaller to others, I think we can probably gain cost efficiencies by mirroring what others have done. And what I struggle with looking at this is saying, okay, look, first and foremost, we're going to go well above 6 figures for a PM, and I have no issue with that. Agree with the PMP certification, but and I have no issue with the PMP running it. My concern is the overall length and projection of the size and the time of the project for the size that we are, and I want to push back very strongly that did you say 36-month time frame?
It says minimum would be 14.
Okay,
I think but it's not just accounting.
I have to say, on my client base, I know it's dumbfounding, but it is typically, even little small cities are typically 2 years, and bigger organizations are 3. I mean, and maybe that's start to finish, from now. I know it's frustrating, but I don't think it's unusual, and I think, I don't know, a big city versus a small city, there's probably some core, GL accounts that everybody has, however many hundreds of those, and I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but yes, we want, I think hopefully hiring a consultant to take us through the process puts us on the short end of the range. I don't think it's less than 1.5 years, and I hope it's not more than 2.5.
Industry standard vendor, off-the-shelf product, no custom programming, no custom development. Standard project
What leads you
plan.
to believe that that's going to be us?
Because we have 30 people max.
Well, I don't think that what you just described exists anymore. And the people who buy that are so unhappy. I mean, so that can't necessarily be that you can't walk in saying that's the answer. I know in the last few years, I cannot tell you how many of my clients have gone, big and small, have gone through ERP conversions, and they're nasty and painful. Really well-run organizations, they're nasty and painful, and really horribly run organizations, they're nastier and painfuler. And they all seem to get these off-the-shelf, big-name brand off-the-shelf, and they're so unhappy.
Custom development means never-ending cost. It means never-ending challenges when you upgrade. It means, look, I have no issue with going forward with a PM. We need an off-the-shelf product, and we need to not put the city in a situation where it's going to spend $500,000 solving this problem. It's not that big a problem. This is my bailiwick, this is my expertise, this is the industry that I'm in, and I know what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, it is, but ERPs are not necessarily.
Absolutely it is. Legal accounting software, and I can name you the vendor names. Every single law firm that I support and the products that they have, we work side by side with accounting vendors. So I respect what you're saying, I respect what industry you're in. This one's mine. $500,000 plus for an ERP is absolutely
Okay,
insane.
but we didn't say 500,000, so.
But it's where we're going, because we're going to sign off on a PM, we're going to spend multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're going to stretch this project out to 36 months. No, we are not.
Okay.
For me, I think the other thing we just need to be really careful of, because we don't always have the best track record of this, is that we do a really good job managing the project manager, because it's in their best interest to draw this out, right? Because the longer it is, the more money they make. So I hear everything Michael says, and I agree. We're not that complicated of a city. We're not that big. We don't need customization, and there's just got to be something. I mean, you can have little tweaks, but let's just not over-engineer this, and let's manage it tightly.
My experience with project managers and recently with the Long Beach is that they do not want to be on site for any long length of time. They want to get in and out as quickly as possible. It's part of their industry. It's what they want to do. The first and most important way of managing the timeline is to clearly define the scope of the project and make sure that we do not leave that scope from beginning to end. That's another reason why you want the project manager as part of the RFP process, so that everybody understands that this is all we're doing, we're not going beyond that, and then having a proper staffing plan in place. Like I said, if it all falls together, it goes like a musical, it just flows right through, and that 14, 18-month time frame is realistic, including keeping up with your day-to-day operations. It's one thing if I have a whole group of staff I can set aside, I'm going to put them in a room and they're going to do ERP implementation, that's all they're going to do. We're not looking at a staffing plan that's doubling the size of the city's staff right now. And so, that being the case, then there's going to be a little bit longer time frame, because you cannot focus full-time on just ERP implementation. That was my thought process. I gave very conservative time frame simply because I don't want to promise something that may end up not being deliverable. I agree 100%, no offense, Mayor, but this product has to be an off-the-shelf. There are configuration pieces that go to it, but we cannot be making modifications to it. We have to adapt the city's processes to what that product delivers to us. We need to limit the extent to which we use those processes, simply because we want simple as possible, because that's the most efficient way to do it, while still in making sure we have the proper internal control and integrity of the system that we need here in this city. So it can be done in a shorter time frame. There are things that cause problems with that. If you end up starting this project in, December, you throw a lot of timelines out of place where it's almost impossible to roll both the general ledger and then the payroll HR system in within that time frame. In general, you want payroll HR to fall in on a calendar year as a start-stop point. It makes it a lot easier to manage that changeover. It doesn't have to be, but that's what your target is almost always going to be. And so if we don't follow that path, it can lead to an extended period for it. It does not have to, but it does add a lot of additional work if it does not.
Does that mean that there's a preferred timeline for launching, or?
Yeah, and it varies by every product that you go with. So the software that we select is going to end up determining the timelines to a certain extent. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The timeline for beginning and starting of both of the two phases we've talked about here. And those phases can run concurrently for a period of time. But you still have to have enough staff to support both products as they're going along.
I'd like to go back to support what Councilman Kemps was talking about. Is I'm supportive of putting the RFP out immediately and getting a consultant identified, or get a couple people in for interviews so that we can select a consultant. But then I also would agree with what Mr. Kemp said regarding, we're going to have to read the Riot Act, if you will, to the consultant, that we don't want a homegrown, specialized system. We want to do it
as expeditiously as humanly possible, and I will ask at that point in time, if they tell me that it's going to cost $10 to implement the ERP, if I gave him 15, could he do it faster and more efficiently? And I want to make sure that we keep the timeline in focus, because I don't want to see sitting here 2 or 3 years from now and say, God, I wish we would get this ERP thing started or get it implemented. It's got to get done.
I have one more question along those lines. Right now, usually our ad hocs or whatever have 2 people in them. This just has 1 council member. Do we need to add a second person, or is 1 sufficient?
So I've been working alongside the treasurer. Let's add that in. But yes, I think a second council member would be preferable.
So it's just been you by yourself?
We haven't done.
I would recommend that it be our Mayor Pro Tem because of his technical background.
I think we tried that already.
Yeah.
I know.
He bailed.
I was like, wait a minute, I'm
tried it
doing a
again.
deja vu on this one.
He bailed.
People keep trying to pull me in, and I have no expertise in this. I mean, it runs on computers. That's the extent of
close
what I
as
know
you
about
get.
it. I know how to approve purchase orders, and that's about it.
Well, we do have the treasurer as an experienced individual. Maybe is there somebody on the FAC that could be an additional, that's got relevant experience? I'm not sure.
I don't think.
It sounds like the mayor has some opinions about this.
I'm sorry?
I said it sounds like the mayor has some opinions about this.
I mean, I'm happy to step in, but if somebody else wants to do it, they're welcome to
Yeah, because we have
it.
the same 2 people on every ad hoc. That's, yeah.
No, I work with David on some, and I work with Jim on some. I just don't work with you on any.
Uh-oh. I was trying to flip through the staff report. I thought maybe I did we see something, was there something in there about including someone from the Finance Advisory Committee? Or am I thinking of something else?
We talked about it at one time.
Did we just talk about it and it's not in there?
I'm not sure it's in this document.
We haven't agendized the creation of an ad hoc here. I think the only action item we've agendized here is the adoption of the, what's the action on here?
Well, issuing the
Scope of
RFP.
service.
Yeah,
So if we
okay.
want
So
to
we don't
create
need an
one.
ad hoc to issue the RFP, so
If we
yeah,
want to
okay.
do that, we can agendize that for a future
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. Okay, so all good points, for sure. I think staff has their marching orders of what we're hoping for and expecting. Public comment? Yes.
Karen?
Karen?
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I had a couple of thoughts about this that may be helpful. Mr. Hanna was talking about the timeline, and I know part of the timeline will be determined by availability of staff to work with the project manager, because they can do certain things, but they're going to need feedback on certain elements for setting the configuration, so that'll be a little bit of a input there. Also, I don't know if there is any opportunity for reaching into the community to help with a vendor selection process. There could be some people in the community who have expertise in ERP implementations. I appreciated what was in the scope of work, and it seems like it really delineates all the functions that are going to be included, but it doesn't really indicate what aspects you want the project manager to cover, which would be configuration of the software, data migration and verification, training, maintenance, and support. And I think those would be key elements, because if you're looking to maybe slim down, once they provide a proposal and the cost, you may decide that you're going to wing it on training, or maybe they've got enough online help that you feel like that's going to be okay, and it's an opportunity for cost. But definitely most ERP implementations indicate that they really didn't invest enough in training, and it was one of the lessons learned from their particular implementation. So knowing what their maintenance and support is, especially the support, like help support, that can make or break people in those first few months of working with the software. And then speaking to the timeline, yes, I think there's going to be critical dates that are going to be helpful for your fiscal year and timing of cutovers and so forth, and so you want to collaborate effectively to make sure that it works well and that reports, from the old system and the new system, you can kind of have clean breaks, and the data migration might be cleaner too. So in any case, best of luck, because ERP systems are, big projects to take on, but it also can provide a lot of automation and visibility and some of the things that we've been having as a city goal. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is that another speaker for this item? Okay. Desiree Myers.
My suggestion is to mature the scope statement, because how long this takes is dependent on how big the scope is. So adding on to some of the things that Karen brought up, which files are you going to migrate? You should be able to look at each of the applications and say, okay, we're going to need something from AR, we're going to need stuff from AP, we're going to need general ledger. What are all the files you're going to migrate? That helps them understand the scope, because if you're looking for them to give you an estimate, they need to know what that is. The next thing is integrations. What does that mean? Well, there's opportunities for efficiencies that you can say, well, we don't need all those integrations, but you may be by-stepping efficiencies that save you money later. One is, let's say you have all your vendors add their invoices online automatically. They just go to your site and put those online, and then those come in automatically instead of waiting for the mail or whatever that is. So going through what are all those integrations you expect. The next thing is understanding, does this scope include changing your processes? Well, if you're going to change your processes, you may want to have those documented. Does it include financial controls? Going through all what that means to your staff and maturing what that is around it, what has to be documented, what has to be trained. Looking at the requirements for what you're looking for, I think your requirements for expertise in the financial systems is light. You may want to go heavier into that. They need to know AP, general ledger. You need to know whether or not they're going to have to rewrite your chart of accounts. A lot of times companies choose to have their chart of accounts corrected at that point in time. So going through the scope and really charting that out into your RFP will give you a much more accurate response back from them. Otherwise, you're heading into a lot of change orders later. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't think there's any more public comment. Any other discussion, or are we ready to make a motion?
What I'm trying to figure out is, I think the residents brought up really good points.
Mhm.
I know jack about ERPs, but I'm good at project management. So it seems like,
Both sets of points are dead on.
yeah, so it seems like I'm wondering, how do we tap into the expertise that exists in our community, right? We always talk about that. And so I'd like to figure out a way to do that rather than, keep it insular and then end up with not a told you so, but gosh, I wish we had considered something else. Considered input that we received. And that might be out of scope for this meeting because we didn't agendize that. But that's why I hesitate with saying, yep, let's just launch the RFP, because what I heard from both speakers was that there are elements we need to include in the scope for the RFP in order to make sure we're getting what we've asked for or what we need.
Well, the discussion is launching a PM, not launching an RFP straight out, right?
Well, I thought what I heard from the speakers was that what we put in the RFP for the project manager is predicated on what scope we're wanting to do with the actual project. I mean, if I heard you two wrong, let me know, but I heard that you need to be clear on what you want to accomplish, so you make sure the person you brought in understands what that scope is and has the correct skill set.
But haven't they covered that when we, on page, where are we, page 2, where they say the city plans, at a minimum, these are the qualifications of the person, and I think you had a certification in there as well, I think you said, Stephen?
Yes. That is correct.
I feel like we've captured those things in the, go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't provide full language from an RFP here, and I appreciate the comments made by members of the public that are here, some of which, is something that we've already discussed. The city manager and I have had a conversation related to scope of work related to the RFP and how important that is already. And so we know that in the end, that becomes the focal point for both this RFP to a certain extent, but extensively for the ERP RFP. And so we have to have a starting point just for the PM. This is a starting point. If councils just would like it to be more refined and a little bit stronger and a little bit more built out, or perhaps want to see a more extensive RFP portion for this whole thing before it goes out, that's also an option for council here. The way we wrote this was to provide council with the greatest amount of flexibility in how they wanted to start this overall project.
Mark, do you have comments? Guidance?
One option here would be to invite we can make available a Word version of this document and invite specific track change edits or suggestions from members of the public that have provided public comment tonight. And we can bring this back to you for a second review at the meeting. The meeting of November 8th, we'll talk about this on the next item, is intended to be a consent calendar type meeting. But this could come back either on that night or the 22nd, which will have some additional, that will be more of a discussion item agenda. So we could bring that version back, or you could allow, if we receive the other alternative would be if we receive the track change edits and suggestions, we could work with a council liaison and staff to incorporate that into the RFP and move forward. I think some of the art here is also on the negotiation with a formal scope of work, which would be included in the formal agreement that we would enter into at a later date. So some conversations, I'm sure, will occur after we receive the proposals and when we begin to negotiate a contract.
I don't need to see another iteration of this. And we all have different ways that we work. The way I work is if I know somebody knows something really in-depth and I'm pulling something together, I like to run it by them and see if I've missed something. And so other people, I mean, I don't know enough about what experience is resident in and there's no slam on you at all, Stephen. I just don't know. And so, for me, if Stephen and Mark wanted to go off and take this advice, and if they decide that they want to get another couple pairs of eyes to review it, I leave that, I don't want to micromanage this, I leave that to you guys to decide if that additional feedback would be valuable. But I don't need to see it in great detail because I don't know enough to tell you what you added or what you forgot.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard the discussion. There's been a lot of discussion. I think you have what you need to get an RFP out the door, and I think we've got to get something out the door. The project doesn't start until we get something out the door. For me, clearly we need a project manager. This project's never going to get accomplished because it's a lot, and staff just can't do it on top of everything they do all day. So I feel like I think you have what you need to get an RFP out the door and get professional responses back. And I think we need to step onto square one and move forward.
What do you think is the form of the responses that you would get? I mean, like, without getting into numbers, I mean, I guess I'm saying, because it is fairly open-ended, but the role here, the project management role is fairly open-ended, so are they going to scope it as an hourly rate, and they're going to, I mean, like,
Yeah, usually, excuse me, yeah, usually it comes back on an hourly rate basis, and sometimes it'll be an hourly rate. There'll be some other costs. Our belief is that a significant amount of this could likely be done remotely, not on site. So we've reduced the travel time. That allows us to, use a broader group of potential project managers. There has to be some on site, but we can do as much as possible via Zoom and other meeting platforms. But usually it comes in the form of hourly rate. I think we would also ask for some preliminary timelines, or not timelines, but expected workloads from that person based on different, not phases, but pieces of the phases, the pre-setup, the RFP, as they were saying, the gap analysis has to be done, the reinvention of the chart of accounts, which was brought up, but that's going to have to be done no matter what product we use, because we're so far away from where they currently are now. So there's a lot of that stuff that's going to have to be built into it. And we're going to want to get as much information from this person, because the more information we can get from these people, the more we can judge their depth of knowledge in this area. So to speak to your question, we need to make sure that we are trying to get as broad a response as we possibly can from that individual and cover different areas, not just what's your hourly rate and what your experience is. So we have to add some additional stuff in there to make sure we're getting that other information.
Sorry, what do you mean?
If I-
You have to, you said, what do you mean by we have to add additional stuff in there?
The RFP is going to have some other, would need to have some additional questions we'd want them to elaborate on that deals with their experience, that allow us to get a better judge of how they operate in this realm.
Okay.
When I was with Long Beach, we had more than one project manager on their ERP implementation. That project, the GL side was essentially good. The HR payroll is now a failed implementation. Okay? I can tell you exactly the reason why it's a failed implementation. They tried to do HR payroll managed by consensus in a large organization. You can never successfully do that.
So what you're saying is, so we're being asked to approve the scope of work, which is one part of the RFP, but you imagine that you guys will refine this. I mean, at a high level, it looks fine.
The RFP itself is going to have questions. It's going to, tell me about your experience with that. How many of these have you done? What are, like, some of the things that the speaker, what's your experience with AP? What's your experience with AR? How do you work with clients to redo the chart of account, right? I mean, the RFP is going to have some set of questions, right? I see you, David, 1 second.
Yeah, if they'll ask questions, we'll want to know their last 3 implementations they were involved with. There's things like that, so we'll give something.
References.
And we don't necessarily need to ask about the project manager, we need to know what the project status is post-implementation, because that's going to say a lot about how the project is managed.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, I would like to just go back to reaffirm what you were suggesting, Ms. Mayor, that we need to get moving on this thing. But I also would like to incorporate the suggestion that the city manager put forth, and maybe we let the 2 residents that made comments this evening review a Word document, and within a week, if they were to put a very short time frame on it, provide their input back to Stephen and Mark, and let them bring back to our meeting on the 2 weeks from now, whenever it is, a revised draft that we could adopt very quickly and not have to spend a great deal of time debating it. Otherwise, I'd be happy to give our city manager the authority to go ahead and incorporate those changes, but if we need to bring it back to council, then I would want to do it at the next meeting. You're up.
This is sticky, but let me just ask it. I support it. I'd love to do it. Do we have an issue because of the election?
An issue with what?
Is there a conflict with the fact that there's an election and a resident's contributing to the document? If the answer to that is no, I completely agree and I support it. If you don't think there's an issue there, I'm just covering our bases. I'm cool.
I don't think there's an issue with a candidate submitting comments to the city. I don't think there's any issue with that.
Perfect. Thanks.
I mean, I think that there's another path here, though, which is that we authorize this and the RFP comes back to us, right?
Our
This authorizes you
intent was not to, our plan was not to bring the full RFP back to you, but to cover the main points tonight, which is the scope of work and some evaluation criteria. The philosophy that we've shared, I think we are all in sync on the philosophy, and that's going to be reflected in the RFP as well. So there'll be
But your
some,
liaison will participate.
and we will work, at the moment, we will work with the liaison if there's an interest in bringing back an ad hoc.
Are you jumping back onto the ad hoc?
We would.
No, I'm not.
If there's a, for example, if there's a subcommittee of the council that the council would like to provide direction to tonight for us to form on the 8th, we could do that and add a second person to the dialogue, essentially.
I like this as the way forward, that we approve this, because I think that this, at a high level, authorizes the city manager to move forward. He's going to work with you as the liaison, and the two of you can decide to engage whomever you'd like in the development of the RFP.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yep.
I just want to get it moving.
Okay. So I don't think you just need a direction,
You don't need
correct?
formal action, right? I think you're
No,
good
I
with the...
think we have direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, just said to provide guidance. Is that good? Okay. Very good, thank you. Thanks for participating, members of the public. All right, made it through the agenda. How about mayor and council member reports? Actually, I don't see future agenda items on here, but did we mean to have that on there?
It was on. There's a,
Not on my hard copy. Okay.
Yeah, I see it on here.
There's a document underneath,
Ah, there we go, it's underneath online. It didn't print on my hard copy,
but
okay.
in the description of mayor and council member reports, includes proposed topics to be calendared on.
Oh, okay, good, thank you. Okay. Councilmember Murdoch.
can you just repeat what you said?
It's on the agenda, so we could have talked about it anyway.
Yeah, so the underneath mayor and council member reports, it says the portion of the agenda is reserved for mayor and council members to provide comments, report on community activities and ad hoc committees, and proposed topics to be calendared on a future council agenda. So it's all under that agenda item.
Okay. I'm going to let you talk about.
Sure.
Okay. The tree inventory ad hoc committee met last week, and members were given homework to help us prepare for an RFP and/or application should CAL FIRE finally open up applications for grant money, and our next meeting is next Tuesday. I'm going to let Jim talk about the La Venta ad hoc, and then I do have some agenda item requests when we're ready to move to that.
Okay.
You want me to go?
Sure.
Okay, so we have been busy with our ad hoc committee on La Venta. We've met a couple of times. We've had several sit-downs, one-on-ones in folks' homes where they have described the impacts they've had. We have more of those scheduled on, was that Monday?
Last Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. Last Thursday, we held here in council chambers, we had invited about 1,000 households to come. We had 25 folks show up. It was a pretty good showing. We had a very cordial meeting with them over about 90 minutes to 2 hours. And I found it very compelling, some of the things that we heard. We had folks there that were on two sides of the issue. But I think most people walked away feeling like they'd been heard in a way that they hadn't previously, and I thought that that was really positive. So anyway, much more work left to be done. So, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add is, we're not going to have an ordinance on November 22nd. So
No.
one of the things that we said in the the neighbor meeting was probably the earliest that something would come out would be in January. So it'd be bad form to do something sooner. Plus, we also told them that we would make sure that we published well in advance of the meeting, not the usual 72-hour turnaround. So we're looking more likely January.
Oh, yikes, okay. And you said you invited 1,000 homes. Did you mean homes within 1,000 feet?
Yes.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
It's like,
That was
really?
a
You
big
invited 20% of the city and 25 people
Well,
showed up? Well,
Cheryl, how many homes was it? About 100, right?
It was like 250
homes?
residents, yes.
It was a lot,
Good.
it was a
That's
lot of
good.
houses.
It was a lot. It was 1,000-foot radius, exterior boundaries.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, good, thank you. That was on my list.
And Councilmember Kemps and I are continuing to make progress on our ad hoc for the housing element, but I'll save the details for another day, I think, where we're at.
Member Kemps?
That was elusive. We're trying to work out details with the existing consultants so that we can move forward to the next stage of getting that finalized. I'll put that out there.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it a dispute, but we have an ongoing negotiation to solve that problem. I actually don't have any updates. I have 2 potential agenda items, so I'll save that until we're there.
Sit tight for 1 second, David?
I just report that Councilmember Kemps and I, and along with some of the city staff, Anastasia.
Microphone.
Whoops. Anastasia and Mr. Presswich, along with representatives from LA County, met with a group of neighbors for hour and a half today up on Via Arriba, having to do with an odor, a sulfur-type smell, which was obviously very noticeable to us as we were standing in this one resident's home and driveway. And I know that we had, I think, a positive meeting where we engaged the county sewer department. They're going to reach out to the sanitation district. They're going to work with Anastasia and Mark and be able to report back to the residents within a relatively short time frame as to some of their suggestions and observations. And we made it very clear to them that we needed to have a game plan that we can monitor to see some kind of resolution. These neighbors have been putting up with this odor for quite some time, from what we understand. And as I said, it was even, I don't think any one of us would have denied the odor this morning. Mark or Anastasia, would you like to add to anything there? You had more conversations with them after I left.
I'm just going to copy off of what you mentioned, that it seemed like it was a successful meeting. I think everyone felt that they've been heard. We got a list of everyone's contact information so that the county can provide updates regularly on the status, in addition to what their overall schedule and timeline is. I've had communications with the county assistant deputy director for public works since that meeting this afternoon. He's already been doing other research. So they are taking it seriously and trying to move forward and providing an update to these residents.
You know what's interesting about that? Did anybody notice this weekend? I noticed it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It got better as Sunday wore on, but every time I passed by Bluff Cove, I mean, same, really
We talked about that.
bad, really bad, I mean, I'll say sewage smell. I mean,
Yep,
I don't know if that's related, but that's,
Oh, it's
Via
related.
Arriba's right above there.
correct.
So,
And
yeah.
Councilmember Kemps brought that up this morning, and I remember going by there over the weekend and my wife making the similar comments.
Yeah.
And we brought that up with the folks from the county, and I think right now they're somewhat perplexed as to what the problem really is. That was my interpretation.
There's going to be some due diligence needed here, and it may take a little bit of time. There may be some expenses to that. But I think they have some working theories that need to be tested out. And so we'll have more information to share as some additional research is learned. So there's some monitoring that's occurring now, has been for several weeks, actually, because we met with the neighbors, some of the neighbors in that area about a month ago. And some of that began back then. This was really a second meeting with more neighbors and a good group of people.
But there are approximately 11 homes impacted that at least were present this morning. Whether any others are remains to be seen.
11,
Right.
that's a lot. Okay,
Oh, one in particular, right?
yeah.
It's bad.
Thinking we've got a bigger sewage problem than we think we do. Sewer problem. I think we need to, you know what, let's talk about, and when I say bring back an agenda item, I don't know, if that's like a bread box this big and trying to, if you connect a bunch of dots, you hear someone over here and someone over here, and you smell that over here, and you kind of then have to say, wait a minute, what's going on? So I think we need to figure out what's going on.
And it's been long-term, because I've taken that trail months ago, and we literally decided to take a longer route back, so we didn't have to pass through it again.
Above Bluff Cove?
Behind Via Riba.
Behind Via Riba. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, David, anything else?
No, that's smelly enough.
Smelly enough? Okay. Future agenda items, David?
Not at the moment.
Okay, Michael?
Two, I think, simple. One is one I've been on the trail of for years, and I think it's getting worse. You may have noted that the city of Torrance decided not to renew their membership with the League of California Cities. I think they continue to stray further away from our residents' values, and I think we need to follow behind them and evaluate that. That's number one. Number two, also a repeating longer-term issue, and no position on this, just a curious item to be raised. The use of bicycles, whether or not electric or gas-powered or otherwise, in and on trails in our parkland, and whether or not we want that to be acceptable or restricted or not, and to discuss that is the item. And that's it.
Okay.
That's in response to one of the recent emails we received as council.
Well, yes. And then I think that kind of also, isn't that really a topic that traffic safety has been considering? So I think when I replied, I said, oh, this is kind of public works. This is sort of parklands and traffic safety a little bit.
Traffic safety has mentioned wanting to have as a future topic for e-bikes and for just all bicycles and things like that in the streets and in the medians. They didn't discuss parklands, but so there's a slight differentiation.
But dovetails maybe.
But it's a similar issue
Concept.
and concept.
Probably wouldn't address the two separately, I don't think. So, okay.
You might have a different kind of policy because you may allow them in one area or have like a speed limit restriction in one area versus another, but.
And again, not an opinion either way, just an issue that was raised again.
We've been talking about it for a little while, for sure. Okay. So, I don't know, a little bit, it reminded me of it when you said the League of California Cities. So I didn't kind of report my comings and goings, but I did have lunch last week with our Assemblyman Al Mertstucci, and I always mess up his last name. And he did talk about, actually, we talked about the League of California Cities too, but, kind of reinforced that what the values of this community are, and certainly in terms of housing density, mostly we were talking about, but anyway, yeah, so I think he was listening, which was good. For my future agenda items, I had La Venta, so you kind of talked about that a little bit. And, you know, you can make this part of an update, doesn't have to be its own agenda item, but I would like, just to make sure we're on track, I want to have an update on the progress of the fiscal year '22 audit. Make sure we're on track there. Future agenda items? Dawn?
So we will likely be reviewing the tennis club's budget the same time that we review their concession agreement renewal. The board is scheduled to review both November 1st. So right now we have the concession agreement on November 22nd, so we might want to just add that the budget would also be that day. And then the other thing is, you know, I'd like to see at some point the department KPIs that are being developed. I think we had set a goal of having them in place the end of the calendar year, and I think it'd be great for council to see those and weigh in on them.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add? No? Good? Okay, well, then, with that, I will call this meeting adjourned to Tuesday, November 8th at 6:30. Boom. Thank you, everyone.